The ferry came for Nora Bell at 7:03 on the first morning after her brothers left her on the island. She had not called it. She had not known she could. She stood on the sagging porch in her grandfather's red flannel shirt, one sock, and a pair of rubber boots she had found beside the stove. Below her, a white state ferry pushed out of the fog and turned toward Wade Bell's half-rotten dock, as if it had been doing so forever. A woman's voice crackled over the landing speaker. "Bell Island, you boarding?" Nora stared at the ramp lowering over the water. Behind the wheelhouse glass, the captain pointed toward a blue flag wrapped tightly around its pole at the end of the dock. "You'll want to raise that next time," the voice said. "Your grandfather knew the drill." Nora's brothers had taken both boats. Cal had told her fuel was too expensive to keep running her back and forth. Dean had said she would be begging to sell the cottage before winter. Neither of them had mentioned that the ferry still stopped. Standing there with cold rain blowing under Wade's shirt, Nora wondered whether her brothers had known. The worst question was whether Wade had. 26 hours earlier, Nora had been sitting at Wade's kitchen table while Dean ate the ham sandwiches meant for after the funeral. He had removed the crusts, although there was no one left in the house who cared whether he did. "You're getting crumbs in the papers," Elaine said. "They're copies. They're still papers." Dean brushed the crumbs onto the floor. Mackerel, Wade's elderly black dog, opened one eye beneath the table, considered the distance, and decided the ham was not worth standing up for. The kitchen had become too small for 4 adults. It had always been small, but Wade's absence changed the dimensions. His oxygen machine no longer wheezed in the hallway. No cane knocked against chair legs. Nobody complained that Elaine made coffee weak enough to baptize people in. Nora sat in Wade's usual chair because everyone else had avoided it. The vinyl cushion made a soft exhale under her weight. Cal leaned against the sink in his funeral suit, staring through the window toward the harbor. He had left his tie in his truck before the graveside service and never put it back on. A pale strip circled his neck above his sunburn, making him look like his head had been attached that morning. Dean was still dressed for the receiving line, navy jacket, polished shoes, silver watch. He had shaken every hand at the church and said, "Dad taught us everything," even though Wade had been their grandfather. Maybe he had grown tired of correcting people. Maybe he liked the promotion. Elaine tapped the first page of the estate copies into alignment. "Your grandfather kept this simple." "He kept everything simple as long as somebody else did it for him," Nora said. The sentence came out before she could stop it. Cal glanced at her. Dean stopped chewing. Elaine's mouth tightened, but not in anger. She looked tired enough to fold. "It's been a long week." It had been a long 2 years, Nora thought. She looked down at her hands. The skin around her nails was still cracked from winter and too much washing. On Thursday morning, she had cleaned Wade's dentures and coaxed him through half a bowl of oatmeal. By Thursday night, the funeral home had taken his body away, and there was a clean rectangle on the carpet where his oxygen machine had stood. Now it was Monday, and people expected the future to begin because the casseroles had been refrigerated. Elaine put on the drugstore glasses she claimed she did not need. The checking account covers the final expenses, with a little left over. The house was transferred to me several years ago, as all of you know. Dean nodded. Cal kept studying the harbor. The business assets were Wade's to distribute. "Dean, he left you the passenger launch and its current permits." Dean's expression barely changed. That meant he had expected it. "The Junebird?" Cal asked. "No, the Queen Mary," Dean said. Elaine gave him a look over her glasses. "Sorry?" Nora pictured the Junebird tied at the commercial pier, freshly painted white with a dark green stripe. Dean had convinced Wade to let him manage its bookings 3 summers earlier. Since then, he had referred to it as his boat whenever customers were listening, and Grandpa's boat whenever it needed repairs. Elaine continued. "Cal, you received the Mercy Ann, the lobster gear listed here, and the shed lease through the end of the year." Cal finally turned from the window. His face changed in a small, naked way before he got control of it. Wade had trusted him with the Mercy Ann for years, but trust and ownership were different things. "Okay," he said quietly. Dean reached across the table and slapped his shoulder. "Guess we're officially in business." "We were already in business. You know what I mean." Nora waited. Elaine removed her glasses, wiped them on a napkin, then put them back on. That pause told Nora more than the words that followed. "Nora, your grandfather left you Bell Island, including Gull Cottage and the landing." Dean lowered his sandwich. For one strange second, Nora thought she had misheard. Belle Island belonged in the same category as Wade's wool shirts and his collection of rusted coffee cans, things so permanently his that nobody had discussed what would happen when he was gone. The whole island? She asked. All 6.2 acres. Cal let out a low whistle. 6.2 acres of what? Dean said. Moss? Dean? I'm asking. Nora could see the cottage as it had looked the previous October, when she took Wade out for what became his last visit. Gray shingles curled from the walls. One corner of the porch had sunk. The generator required a screwdriver shoved into a loose connection before it would start, and the bathroom faucet produced water the color of weak tea for the first 30 seconds. Wade had sat near the stove with a blanket across his knees and criticized the way Nora stacked firewood. You'll learn, he had told her. She had thought he meant the firewood. Elaine slid a copy of the property description across the table. Nora did not touch it. What am I supposed to do with Belle Island? Dean gave a short laugh through his nose. That was all. Not a joke, not an answer. Somehow, it hurt worse than either. Elaine ignored him. You loved it there. When I was 19. You went out with Grandpa last fall. To change his bedding and drain the pipes. Cal rubbed the side of his jaw. Doc's pretty rough. I know the dock is rough. Just saying. She could sell it, Dean said. Nobody had asked him. He leaned back, warming to the subject. It fits with what I'm building. Private island lunches, small events, sunset packages. Fix up the dock. Maybe put tables out by the North Rocks. People from Boston would eat that up. You found a use for my inheritance fast, Nora said. I'm trying to help. You inherited a boat with an engine, and payments, maintenance, insurance, fuel, payroll, Dean, Elaine said. No, she's acting like we walked out with bags of cash. Boats cost money. Land just sits there. Nora looked again at the property description. Belle Island, Lot 14. Improvements: 1 seasonal dwelling, 1 storage structure, 1 timber landing. Seasonal dwelling. That was a polite phrase for a house that tried to kill its pipes every January. Grandpa knew the boats belonged with us, Dean said. Cal knows the water. I know the customer side. Nora always loved puttering around that cottage. Nora looked up. Puttering? You know what I mean. No. Tell me. Dean's confidence slipped half an inch. You like making places comfortable. She nearly laughed. For 2 years, she had made Wade comfortable while Dean texted to ask if Grandpa was up for company and then failed to come because the weather looked bad. Cal had visited more often. He brought lobsters. Wade was too sick to crack and fix the bedroom window that rattled. Then he returned to the harbor before Wade needed help getting to the toilet. Nora had become good at making discomfort invisible. Apparently that looked like puttering from a safe distance. Elaine pressed her fingertips to her forehead. Can we please get through one conversation without keeping score? We'd have to start from 0, Nora said. Mackerel shifted under the table and rested his chin on her shoe. Dean folded his copy of the will in half. Look, if she doesn't want the place, I'll make a fair offer. You already said the land just sits there. It does, unless somebody has a plan. And you have one. I have an actual business. There it was. Actual. Nora's restaurant job had once been actual. So had her rented room above the pharmacy, her health insurance, and the savings account she had spent down while Wade's needs increased. She had not officially quit. She had simply reduced her shifts, then reduced them again until the schedule stopped, including her. Dean leaned forward, forearms on the table. Grandpa probably thought the island was safer for you. The boats are a lot to handle. A cottage is more your speed. Cal looked at the floor. Elaine said Dean's name, but softly, as if the problem were his volume. Nora waited for someone to correct the sentence itself. No one did. She stood so quickly Wade's chair rolled backward into the wall. Mackerel scrambled up, startled into a bark. Nora, Elaine said. I need air. You can't leave. We haven't discussed the tools. Give them to the boats. She went through the hallway and into Wade's bedroom, closing the door behind her. Her 4 boxes were stacked beneath the window. Clothes in 2, kitchen things in 1. The last held bank statements, a framed photograph, 3 paperbacks, and the nursing school brochure she had kept for no good reason. Wade's bed had been stripped, but the room still carried the cedar smell of the chest rub she used on him at night. His dented brass bell sat on the bedside table. He had rung it whenever he needed her, once for water, twice for the bathroom, 3 times when he could not catch his breath. Nora picked it up, then set it down before it could make a sound. A light knock came at the door. Cal entered without waiting. "Dean's an ass," he said. "You were very brave out there. I didn't know what to say. You could have tried, 'Don't talk to her like that.'" Short sentence. No nautical vocabulary required. Cal winced. He wandered to the window and looked toward the harbor again, as though the Mercy Ann might have floated away during lunch. "You know I would have helped more with Grandpa. You did help. Not enough." Nora sat on the edge of the bare mattress. "No." He took that without arguing. After a moment, he nodded toward the boxes. "Mom says you can keep staying here. It's her house. She wants you here. She wants somebody here. Different thing. Where are you going to go?" Nora looked past him toward the slice of gray water visible between buildings. "When can you take me to the island?" Cal turned around. "Today? You've got a boat now." His face tightened at the word now, but she did not let him escape into guilt. She was tired of handling the soft edges of everyone else's feelings. "Today's getting rough," he said. "Tomorrow would be better. The forecast is worse tomorrow. I'd have to run you out, come back, then go again whenever you need something. Fuel isn't cheap." She stared at him. "I'm not saying I won't take you," he said. "I'm saying I can't be your personal ferry." Something settled inside her then. Not courage exactly. Courage sounded clean. This felt closer to spite with a straight back. "One trip," she said. "My boxes, groceries, and mackerel. After that, you're free." Nora. One trip. Cal carried the boxes down to the Mercy Ann at 3 that afternoon. Dean watched from the deck of the Junebird, but did not offer to help. Elaine packed a cooler with eggs, ham, half a casserole, and 3 kinds of mustard. She kept adding things until Nora removed the jar of olives and said the island was not a bomb shelter. The crossing took 27 minutes. Cal barely spoke. Mackerel stood in the bow, with his ears blowing backward, briefly looking like a much younger dog. Gull Cottage appeared between the spruce trees, its roof dark with rain. The dock leaned toward the water, as if listening. Cal tied up carefully. He carried the boxes inside, checked the propane, and got the generator coughing after 6 attempts. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No." He waited, perhaps hoping she would turn that into a request. She did not. When the Mercy Ann pulled away, Nora stood at the end of the dock with Mackerel pressed against her leg. Cal lifted one hand. She could not make herself lift hers. The boat grew smaller, heading toward the mainland where the Junebird waited in the harbor, and Wade's kitchen still smelled of funeral ham. Behind Nora, the cottage settled in the wind. Above her, an old blue flag knocked softly against its pole, wrapped so tightly around itself that she mistook the sound for a loose rope. She left the flag knocking. Everything on Belle Island knocked. A loose shutter tapped the kitchen wall. A maple branch scraped the roof. The stovepipe ticked when the wind pressed against it, and somewhere beneath the porch, a piece of metal kept up a nervous little clink, as though something down there wanted to be let in. Nora carried Elaine's cooler into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Warm air smelled back at her. Excellent. Mackerel looked hopeful. "Not you. You're doing great." The generator had sounded healthy for perhaps 4 minutes after Cal left. Now it coughed in uneven bursts from the shed. Each time it faltered, the kitchen light dimmed until the yellow bulb showed only a tired orange thread. Nora found a screwdriver in the junk drawer. Wade kept one there because the generator's loose connection was not, in his opinion, an actual problem. An actual problem required money. Anything that could be temporarily corrected with a screwdriver, baling wire, or profanity was simply a feature of ownership. She crossed the wet grass to the shed and opened the door. The generator shuddered in a blue cloud of exhaust. Nora crouched beside it, found the tape section of wire Wade had shown her, and pressed the screwdriver against the terminal. The engine steadied. She removed the screwdriver. It sputtered. Of course. She wedged the handle beneath the wire and watched the engine settle into a begrudging hum. "If this catches fire," she told Mackerel, "we're going to Dean's house first." Mackerel sneezed in the exhaust. Inside, Nora transferred the eggs, ham, and casserole to the refrigerator. She put the 3 mustards in the door and felt stupidly comforted by the sight of them. Elaine had packed the expensive stone ground one Wade liked, though Wade had been unable to taste much of anything by the end. Nora shut the door harder than necessary. She made a list on the back of an old grocery receipt. Roof tarp, batteries, flashlights, drinking water, mouse traps. Food that did not require refrigeration. generator that did not need to be threatened with office supplies. She crossed out the last item. The rain began in earnest before dark. Water struck the windows sideways and found the weak places around the frames. Nora stuffed dish towels along the sills. A leak over the pantry revealed itself one drop at a time, each landing precisely in the middle of the floor. She put a saucepan beneath it, then discovered another leak near the stove. By 8, the kitchen contained 6 pots in places where pots had no business being. There was no television signal. Her phone showed 1 bar if she stood at the upstairs landing and held it near the east window, but the battery was at 23%. She turned it off. Mackerel followed her from room to room until she opened the door to Wade's bedroom. Then he stopped. The dog stared past her at the narrow bed. "Oh, buddy." Mackerel walked in slowly, sniffed the empty mattress, and turned once beside it. His back legs struggled beneath him. Nora grabbed the folded wool blanket from the cedar chest and spread it on the floor. He lay down without looking at her. Nora sat with her back against the bed frame. Rain rattled the roof. She could hear Wade saying the shingles had another season in them. He had said that for at least 4 seasons. "You knew," she said to the empty room. "You had to know this place was falling apart." Mackerel breathed heavily through his nose. "You could have left me something that didn't need feeding." His ear twitched. No offense. She found Wade's red flannel shirt hanging behind the bedroom door. It smelled faintly of wood smoke even after months in town. Nora put it on over her sweater and rolled the sleeves twice. She tried sleeping in the bed. The mattress dipped toward the center, pulling her into the hollow where Wade's body had once rested. After 20 minutes, she moved to the other side. After another 20, she turned the pillow over. At midnight, the generator stopped. The cottage went black so completely that Nora heard herself inhale. She found the flashlight on her phone and made it to the shed in the rain. The screwdriver had vibrated loose. She jammed it back into place, but the generator would not start. The fuel gauge hovered above, empty. Cal had checked the propane. He had not checked the gasoline. Nora stood in the shed doorway with rain dripping off Wade's shirt and imagined the Mercy Ann warm at the harbor. She imagined calling Cal, making him turn around, giving Dean the satisfaction of seeing her boxes come back before the funeral flowers wilted. Then she remembered her phone had 1 bar only if she stood upstairs, and there was something almost insulting about being too stranded to surrender properly. She returned to the cottage, unplugged the refrigerator so the dying generator could not damage it if power returned, and put the eggs and ham back in Elaine's cooler. The rain had made the air cold enough that she carried the cooler onto the porch. Mackerel slept through all of it. At dawn, Nora woke sideways across Wade's bed with 1 foot bare. Her missing sock was soaked where it had landed beneath a leak. The saucepan in the kitchen was full. A new drip had begun over the sink, which at least showed initiative. She brewed coffee on the propane stove and drank it black because the milk had soured. The first swallow was terrible. The second was worse because she knew what to expect. Then the horn sounded. By the time the woman from the wheelhouse stepped onto the wet ferry ramp, Nora had managed to find her other sock. It was not the same color, but it was dry. The captain wore an orange rain shell and had short gray curls flattened against her forehead. She looked from Nora to Mackerel, then toward the wrapped flag. "I saw movement up here," she said. "Thought you might be trying to signal. I was trying to keep my dog from going down the stairs." Mackerel stood at the top of the dock, making no visible effort to go anywhere. The captain studied him. "He looks reckless. He hides it well." That earned Nora the beginning of a smile. A man in navy coveralls came down the ramp carrying a metal hook. He was broad-shouldered, with a dark beard and the patient expression of someone who spent his days around machines that broke for reasons they did not intend to explain. He tested the first dock plank with his boot. "Jonah," the captain said, "please don't make that face in front of the new owner." "I'm not making a face. You made the dock face. It moved. It's a floating dock. That's one of its better qualities." The man crouched and looked beneath the outer edge. "This corner's pulling away from the bracing." Nora came down 2 steps. "Is it going to collapse?" "Not this morning." The captain removed 1 glove and held out her hand. "Marisol Vega, Nora Bell." "I know. I'm sorry about Wade." Nora shook her hand. Marisol's palm was cold and rough. "Were you at the funeral? I was on the outer route. Half my crew went, though. Your grandfather fed enough of us over the years." Nora looked at the ferry. Through the windows, perhaps a dozen passengers watched with the mild interest of people grateful that someone else's stop was taking longer than expected. "I don't understand why you came in. You're a flag stop. We pass at 7:03 every weekday, unless weather or maintenance changes the route. If you want us, raise the blue flag. We see it from the channel. After-hours requests go through dispatch, but don't get hopeful. We're transportation, not room service. Wade called you? Sometimes. Usually he raised the flag. He always made it sound like he had arranged a ride. Wade could make opening a can of beans sound like a maritime operation. That was true enough to hurt. Jonah stepped over a split board and pressed his weight against the nearest piling. He should have replaced this section last spring. Marisol glanced at him. You told him that. I told him every spring, and every spring he told you, he'd get to it. Nora folded Wade's sleeves across her chest. Marisol's expression softened. The landing needs work, but we can use it carefully. We won't bring a full freight load across until Jonah clears it. Passenger stops are fine if people don't bunch up. How many people counts as bunching? Depends which people. 3 normal-sized ones, Jonah said. 2 if one is carrying an upright piano. Nora looked down the dock. Up close, the repaired patches were easy to distinguish from the original boards. Wade had replaced pieces only where shoes landed most often, creating a crooked path of newer wood down the middle. Does the stop transfer with the house? She asked. Marisol tilted her head. Transfer? My grandfather died. I heard. So I thought maybe the service ended. Belle Island is still on the route. Someone still lives here. Seems to be you. The statement was so simple that Nora had no defense against it. Marisol reached into her jacket and pulled out a folded paper schedule, softened from being handled. She circled 2 times with a pen. Morning run toward town. Evening run back. Saturday's different, and Sunday depends on the season. Don't trust the printed holiday schedule. Nobody understands it, including whoever writes it. Nora accepted the paper. How much? For the schedule? For the ferry. Marisol told her the passenger fare. It was less than Cal spent on fuel starting the Mercy Ann. If you're not boarding, we need to move, Marisol said. You have food? Yes. Heat? Propane stove. Power? Nora glanced toward the shed. I have a screwdriver. Marisol nodded as if this answer qualified. Wade would approve. That was precisely what Nora did not want to hear. Jonah stood and wiped his hands on his coveralls. Don't put anything heavy on the outside corner. I'll bring measurements from the plans next time. Wade never listened to me, so it'll be refreshing if you pretend. I can pretend. Good enough? They boarded. The ramp lifted, leaving Nora on the wet dock with the schedule in her hand. Marisol sounded 2 short blasts before pulling away. Nora watched the ferry return to the channel. It was not graceful the way Cal's boat was graceful. It was square, loud, and painted the practical colors of a municipal hallway. It did not belong to a belle. It did not care who Wade had trusted with an engine or who Dean considered suited to business. It simply came when the flag was raised. Upstairs, Nora turned on her phone and held it beside the east window. Cal answered on the 5th ring. You okay? He said immediately. Did you know the ferry stopped here? Silence pressed against the line. I knew it used to. It came this morning. Okay. Okay? I don't know what you want me to say. You told me you couldn't be my personal ferry like the only other option was swimming. I said I couldn't keep running back and forth. You didn't think the state ferry was relevant. I didn't know they'd keep the stop after Grandpa. You could have mentioned it. The connection crackled. Cal exhaled into the phone. Nora, I wasn't trying to strand you. You just didn't try very hard not to. He was quiet. Dean knew, Cal said finally. He used to complain the wake pushed his tour boat around at the pier. That landed differently. Of course he did. Look, the ferry's slow. It doesn't always run in bad weather. It's not some magic solution. No, it's transportation. She ended the call before he could answer. Her phone rang again almost at once. Dean. Nora watched his name until the screen went dark. Then she went down to the dock with a pair of work gloves and unwrapped the blue flag from its pole. The cloth was faded almost gray along the fold, but when the wind caught it, the center flashed bright as deep water. She practiced raising it once. The pulley squealed. The flag climbed anyway. From the porch, Mackerel barked as if she had accomplished something impressive. Nora lowered the flag before the next ferry passed. She had nowhere to go that day, but she could. The ability to leave did not fix the refrigerator. Nora spent the afternoon trying to save what Elaine had packed. She fried 6 eggs, baked the casserole on the propane stove, and ate enough ham to make mackerel stare at her with professional concern. What remained went into the cooler, beneath 2 bags of ice she found fused together in the freezer. By dusk, the ice had become one large bag of cold water. She took inventory of her finances at the kitchen table. $287.19 in checking. $40 folded behind her driver's license. A credit card she had paid down during the years when she still believed emergencies arrived one at a time. The list on the grocery receipt had grown: gasoline, generator wire, hammer, dock boards, roof tarp, window putty, dog food. She added coffee, then circled it so poverty would understand there were limits. The next morning, Nora raised the blue flag. She had been awake since 5, worried she would miss the ferry, and was standing on the dock 20 minutes early when the horn sounded from the channel. The ferry turned toward her, with none of the dramatic urgency it had possessed through fog and ignorance. In clear weather, it looked less like fate and more like a big square appliance. The ramp came down. Marisol leaned from the wheelhouse window. "See? Trainable. I've always done well with flags." Nora stepped aboard with a backpack, Wade's empty gas can, and 2 canvas grocery bags. Mackerel stood on the porch watching her. "He all right alone?" Marisol asked. "He's spent the last 5 years pretending not to hear Grandpa. He can pretend not to hear me until 4. A deckhand secured the ramp. Nora paid her fare from the folded bills in her wallet and felt each one leave. The passenger cabin smelled of wet coats, diesel, and coffee. 7 people sat along the windows. 2 wore hospital scrubs beneath their jackets. A silver-haired man held a cardboard box of plumbing fittings on his lap. A woman knitting something green looked up when Nora entered. "You're Wade's granddaughter," she said. Nora's first impulse was to deny it. "Nora. Faye Kitteridge. I live on Long Shoal. Your grandfather once kept me overnight during a storm. That sounds like him. He put paprika in the clam chowder. That also sounds like him. It was disgusting." Faye returned to her knitting with the air of someone who had delivered a compliment. Nora took a seat near the stern. Through the window, Belle Island drew away. The cottage looked smaller from the channel. The spruce trees hid the sagging porch, the stained ceilings, and the pots collecting rainwater. At that distance, the whole place appeared almost intentional. Jonah emerged from below, carrying a steel toolbox. He noticed the gas can at Nora's feet. "You can't fill that in town and bring it into the passenger cabin. I was going to hold it out the window. I'm telling you because people try. How do I get fuel out there? Freight run. Approved can, marked with your name. Leave it at the terminal office." She lifted Wade's old red can. His name had been painted on the side in white letters, although time had reduced it to WAB. "This approved?" Jonah examined the cap and the rust around the seam. "For use as a planter, maybe." He sat across from her and opened the toolbox. Inside, rows of wrenches lay in foam cutouts, each one cleaner than most of Nora's silverware. "What's the generator doing?" he asked. "Working when threatened. Specific. The terminal wire is loose." Wade wedged a screwdriver beneath it. Jonah closed his eyes briefly. "Of course he did. I improved the system." "How?" "I used a larger screwdriver." He looked at her, then laughed once. It seemed to surprise him. "Buy a ring terminal and a proper crimp connector," he said. "Show the hardware store a picture of the wire if you don't know the gauge. Disconnect the battery before you touch anything. Will that keep it running? It'll keep the screwdriver from welding itself to the frame." Running depends on what else Wade refused to repair. Nora took out her phone and opened the photograph she had taken. Jonah enlarged it with 2 fingers and pointed to the terminal. "See the green on that copper? I thought that was paint. That's corrosion." "Good. I was afraid it might be something cheap." The ferry entered the harbor 40 minutes later. The Junebird sat at the commercial pier, with Dean standing on its upper deck, speaking to a man in a golf jacket. Dean looked toward the ferry as it approached. Nora turned away before he could see her watching. Elaine was waiting inside the terminal. She sat beneath a rack of tourist maps with Nora's phone charger coiled in her lap and a paper bag beside her. When Nora walked in, Elaine stood and held out the charger as if returning something abandoned at a crime scene. "Cal said your phone was dying. My phone is always dying. You could have stayed at the house. You mentioned that." Elaine picked up the paper bag. "I brought towels. and the good flashlight from the basement. Mom, I'm not crossing the frontier. You spent the night without electricity. That happens during storms. It wasn't a storm. It was raining with ambition. Elaine did not smile. Her eyes moved over Nora's clothes, checking for damage. Nora had put on clean jeans, but Wade's red flannel was still over her sweater. Dean said the roof leaks. Dean hasn't been inside that cottage since August. He knows the condition. He also knew the ferry stopped there. Elaine's mouth parted, then closed. Did you? Nora asked. I knew Wade used it. That wasn't my question. I assumed you knew. Everyone assumed I knew, except the person who needed to know. Elaine looked down at the bag. Your grandfather didn't explain things. You know how he was. Nora did know. Wade gave instructions about objects, never circumstances. Turn the red valve before winter. Don't use the bent cleaver on bone. Raise the blue flag. He believed knowledge traveled through walls. I need to get to the hardware store, Nora said. I'll drive you. You don't have to. I know. Elaine's car still smelled faintly of Wade's oxygen tanks. Nora put the paper bag of towels in the back seat and held the flashlight on her lap. At the hardware store, she took photographs of everything she could not afford. Roof tarps came in 4 sizes and 3 grades, each promising protection against weather, mildew, ultraviolet light, and consequences. She bought the cheapest heavy one, a box of roofing nails, the wire connectors Jonah recommended, 2 flashlights, batteries, window putty, and an approved fuel can. The total erased nearly a third of what remained in checking. Elaine reached for her purse. No, Nora said. I know. The cashier looked between them and became deeply interested in the receipt printer. Outside, Elaine opened the trunk. Accepting help isn't the same as failing. Sometimes it comes with very similar paperwork. I'm not Dean. No. You just keep asking me to make his life easier. Elaine put the tarp into the trunk with more force than it required. I am asking all of you not to destroy this family before your grandfather has been dead a week. He got 2 boats. I'm aware. Cal got a boat. I was at the table. And I got a house I can't keep dry. But somehow I'm the dangerous one because I'm not smiling about it. Elaine shut the trunk. You think I don't know what you gave up? Nora looked at her. The parking lot wind moved Elaine's hair across her face. She pushed it back with one hand. I know, Elaine repeated. Then why didn't you help me? Elaine's eyes filled, not dramatically. The wetness appeared and stayed, making Nora feel cruel without making her feel wrong. Because he wouldn't let me, Elaine said. And because you did. There were 100 answers to that. Nora could not choose one before Elaine walked around to the driver's side. They drove to the restaurant in silence. The harbor house occupied a low blue building beside the public marina. At 10 in the morning, the dining room was empty, but the kitchen already hummed with fans and old rock music. Tessa Rowan stood at the prep table cutting fennel. She was 49, broad through the shoulders, with iron gray hair twisted into a knot and reading glasses hanging from a beaded cord. She glanced up when Nora entered. You look terrible, Tessa said. Thank you. I meant at the funeral too. Black washes you out. You should print sympathy cards. I've considered it. Tessa wiped her knife and came around the table. She hugged Nora briefly, firmly, then stepped back before either of them had to decide what the hug meant. You eating? So much ham. That's not food. That's what grief turns into when it's sliced. Nora looked toward the schedule board. Her old name had been erased months ago, but the faint outline remained beneath newer ink. I need shifts. Tessa did not pretend to misunderstand. How many? As many as fit between 7:03 and 5:40. What? The ferry schedule. Nora explained only what was necessary. Tessa listened without interrupting, although one eyebrow rose when Nora mentioned the generator screwdriver. I can give you prep, 9 to 3:30, Thursday through Sunday, she said. Some lunch line if Curtis keeps arriving with that look on his face. What look? The one suggesting employment surprised him again. When can I start? Tomorrow. Nora nodded too quickly. Tessa picked up her knife. You still remember how to make chowder? Yes. Wade told everybody mine was too thick. Wade believed spoons should stand upright in soup. Wade was wrong about many things. The words settled gently between them. Yes, Nora said, he was. Dean was waiting beside Elaine's car when they came out. He had changed out of his funeral clothes into a navy quarter zip with the Junebird logo embroidered over his heart. His arms were crossed. You ignored my call, I noticed. We need to talk about Belle Island. I need to catch a ferry. I could run you out. Nora shifted the hardware bag against her hip. That's generous now that I don't need it. Dean glanced toward Elaine. Can we not do this in a parking lot? You came to the parking lot. He lowered his voice. Cal said you're upset because nobody told you about the ferry. No, I'm delighted. I love finding out I'm less trapped than my brothers suggested. Nobody trapped you. That service is slow, weather-dependent, and the dock's barely usable. I didn't mention it because it doesn't solve the larger problem, which is, you can't afford that place. The directness stopped her. Dean uncrossed his arms. I'm not insulting you. Roof, dock, taxes, winterization, it adds up. Let me make an offer before you pour money into something that still won't work. Won't work for what? For a life. Nora thought of Mackerel waiting on the porch, the blue flag lifting above the dock. The schedule folded in her pocket. What if I'm not building the kind you recognize? Dean's face softened, and for half a second, he looked like the brother who used to pick her up from late restaurant shifts, singing badly with the windows open. Then he said, Grandpa knew you'd get sentimental. Nora handed the hardware bag to Elaine, opened the trunk, and lifted out the tarp. No, she said. Grandpa counted on it. The afternoon ferry carried Nora, her supplies, and a fuel can marked Nora Belle in fresh black ink. Jonah helped move everything across the dock's center boards without stepping near the weak corner. As the ferry pulled away, Nora unlocked the enclosed porch to make room for the tarp. The swollen door resisted until she shoved it with her shoulder, dust lifted in the gray light. Shelves of chipped mugs lined one wall. Beneath them, wooden hooks bore names in Wade's blocky handwriting. Marisol, Faye, Len, Crew. A warped guest book lay beneath a stack of old ferry schedules. Nora opened it carefully. The first page she found was dated 11 years earlier. Storm held us overnight. Wade burned the soup and blamed the stove. Never been so glad to eat anything. 6 people had signed beneath it. Nora stood in the dusty porch, holding evidence of a grandfather she recognized perfectly, and a life he had somehow never explained. Nora read until the light thinned enough that she had to hold the guest book near the window. Most entries were brief. Ferry canceled. Wade cheated at cribbage, engine trouble, coffee good, bed terrible, thank you for the dry socks. We left them washed on the line. One unsigned comment read, Wade Bell makes soup the way other men make threats. A later hand had added, you still ate 2 bowls, Len. The pages held storms, missed connections, ferry delays, and names Nora had heard without knowing where they belonged. Faye appeared often, usually complaining about food. Marisol had once drawn a small ferry beside a note about staying until 2 in the morning. Jonah's name began appearing 9 years ago, first in block letters and later in a quick slant, usually beside complaints about something Wade had promised to fix. Nora found no grand declarations. Nobody wrote that the cottage had changed a life. They thanked Wade for coffee, blankets, dry gloves, and phone calls made when the island line still worked. Their gratitude was ordinary enough to be trusted. She closed the book when she reached the last written page. It was dated the previous November, stopped to check the landing, Wade in town for treatment, porch cold without him complaining in it. Jonah had signed that one. A voicemail from Dean waited upstairs. I'm not trying to pressure you, it began, in the tone Dean used exclusively when applying pressure. I just want to put numbers in front of you while everything's still simple. Nora deleted it before the numbers arrived. She carried the new wire connector to the generator shed, disconnected the battery, and studied the photograph on her phone. The damaged copper crumbled when she touched it. She cut the wire back, stripped a fresh section with Wade's dull utility knife, and crimped on the terminal. It looked almost professional if she kept the flashlight moving. She reconnected the battery and pulled the starter. The generator coughed once. Don't embarrass me. She pulled again. It caught, rattled, and settled into a steady mechanical thrum. The kitchen lights came on. Nora stood in the shed, smiling so suddenly that her face hurt. Mackerel barked from the cottage, objecting to either the noise or her success. Inside, the refrigerator began humming. She moved Elaine's food from the cooler, wiped water from the floor, and poured herself a glass of tap water. It was brown for 3 seconds, yellow for 5, then clear enough to lower her standards. The roof tarp remained folded on the porch. Putting it up required climbing onto wet shingles in the dark. which even Wade might have called unwise if someone else were doing it. Nora set her alarm for 5:30. The alarm went off at 5:31 because the clock had lost a minute during the outage. She dressed in clean jeans and an old Harbor House t-shirt, fed mackerel, packed 2 slices of casserole, and raised the flag under a sky the color of dishwater. The ferry arrived on schedule. Jonah stood on the ramp holding a roll of paper. I brought the landing measurements. Good morning to you too. It's morning. I haven't evaluated whether it's good. He handed her a rough drawing with lengths marked along each section of dock. Beside the outer corner, he had written, "Do not trust this." You label things like my grandfather, Nora said. He didn't label anything. That's why people got hurt. Did people get hurt? Mostly me. Marisol called down from the wheelhouse. Stop flirting with the unsafe structure. We have a schedule. Jonah looked upward. I'm inspecting. Nora stepped past him onto the ramp. I believe she was talking to the dock. Marisol laughed loud enough for the passengers to hear. At the Harbor House, Tessa gave Nora an apron, pointed toward 4 crates of onions, and said, "Let's find out whether grief improved your knife work." It had not. Nora's first onion came out in pieces ranging from translucent slivers to objects that could have been used in landscaping. Her wrist felt stiff. The old knife callus at the base of her finger had softened during the months when most of her cooking involved oatmeal, broth, and whatever Wade could swallow without becoming angry. Tessa worked beside her without comment. By the 3rd onion, the rhythm returned. Grip, guide, rock the blade. The pieces became even. Her shoulders lowered. The kitchen filled around them. Curtis arrived 8 minutes late wearing sunglasses and carried 2 sacks of potatoes downstairs without removing them. A line cook named Mel, whom Nora remembered from before Wade got sick, stopped long enough to squeeze Nora's shoulder and say, "I'm glad you're back," then rescued a pan before the butter burned. Nobody asked her how she was every 5 minutes. There were leaks to wash, fish to portion, stock to strain. The exhaust fans were loud enough to discourage emotional inquiry. At 11, Tessa slid a spoon across the counter. Taste. Nora tried the chowder. Needs salt. Again. She tasted from a clean spoon. It still needs salt. Tessa added half a handful. Wade would have said it needs potatoes. Wade thought chowder was mashed potatoes with nautical ambitions. Put that on the menu. By noon, the restaurant was full. Nora worked the cold station during the rush, building salads and lobster rolls, while ticket after ticket appeared above the counter. Her body remembered where to reach before her mind did. Tongs, towels, pickled onions, lemon wedges. At 1:15, a plate came back because the customer had ordered fries instead of salad. Nora stood staring at it, heart pounding as though she had missed one of Wade's medications. Tessa took the plate from her hand. "It's lettuce, Nora. Nobody died." "I know." "Do you?" Nora looked at the bright pile of greens, untouched except for one displaced cucumber. Apparently not. Tessa dumped the salad into a clean bowl and passed the plate to Curtis for fries. No lecture, no careful face. The next ticket came in, and Nora filled it. At 3:30, her feet ached. Her hair smelled of onions and hot oil. Tessa packed a quart of chowder into a plastic container. "For dinner," she said. "I can't keep taking things. It's Tuesday's batch. By tomorrow it becomes staff lunch, and by Friday it becomes a legal question." Nora put it in her bag. Tessa leaned against the prep counter. "You did fine. I sent out a salad to a fry person. We recovered as a nation. I'm serious. So am I. You're here Thursday through Sunday unless the island sinks. What if the ferry doesn't run? Then call. The phone signal is bad. Then raise a distress flag. I assume you have one now." Nora nearly smiled. "Blue? Good. Red clashes with your hair?" Elaine had left a text asking if she needed anything. Cal had left one saying the weather would turn by Friday and she should check the north shutters. Dean had sent 3 paragraphs beginning with, "I've been thinking practically." Nora answered Elaine with fine, Cal with I know, and Dean with nothing. The evening ferry was 20 minutes late. At 30 minutes, people in the terminal began standing each time a truck passed outside. Nora watched the clock and pictured Mackerel hungry on the porch. The ferry arrived at 42 minutes past schedule with a low vibration running through the cabin floor. Jonah came up from below before they left the harbor, went directly to the wheelhouse, and disappeared again. Marisol's voice came over the speaker. "We're making a brief operational stop at Belle Island." A man near Nora muttered, "That sounds expensive." Faye Kitteridge looked up from a different green knitting project. Everything sounds expensive if you say operational first. The ferry turned toward Belle Island. It reached the landing without trouble, but instead of lowering the ramp only for Nora, the crew tied off both ends. Jonah stepped onto the dock, spoke to Marisol through his radio, then jogged toward the engine access at the stern. "How brief?" Nora asked. Marisol leaned from the window. "Depends whether the temperature alarm is lying." "Do alarms do that?" "The talented ones." Rain began with very little warning, hard enough to send the passengers away from the windows. Marisol looked toward the cottage. "Is the porch open?" Nora followed her gaze. The enclosed porch was cleaner than it had been, but only because she had moved the dirt into piles. The shelves were dusty. One bench had a split seat. Wade's mugs had not been washed in years. "How long are we talking?" Long enough for Len to complain. A silver-haired man holding the same box of plumbing fittings as the day before called from the cabin. I heard that. Nora went up the dock and forced the porch door open. 7 passengers came in out of the rain. Len saw the hook bearing his name and hung his coat on it without hesitation. Faye took the bench beneath hers, moved a bucket of cleaning rags, and resumed knitting. "You haven't changed the curtains," Faye said. "I've owned them 4 days." "Good. They're ugly, but they keep the sun off." The 2 women in hospital scrubs sat near the window. The ferry deckhand remained by the door, listening to his radio. Marisol arrived last, rain shining on her jacket. Nora stood in the middle of them, with no idea what Wade would have done first. Then she remembered the coffee. The old percolator remained on the pantry shelf. She rinsed it, filled it, and lit the propane stove. Wade's mugs went into hot water. She found sugar in a sealed tin and powdered creamer that had expired so long ago it had become historical. "No creamer," she announced. "Mercy," Faye said. Nora warmed Tessa's chowder and divided it into 7 mismatched bowls. There was not enough for generous servings. Nobody complained, although Len added hot sauce from a bottle he carried in his coat. "You travel with that?" Nora asked. "I knew Wade." Marisol ate standing beside the window. "This is better than his. He'll be furious." "Good." The porch changed as people occupied it. Coats filled the labeled hooks. Wet shoes lined the wall. Conversation moved around Nora without requiring her to lead it. The 2 nurses argued about a television show. Len explained to the deckhand why modern plumbing parts were inferior. Faye counted stitches and insulted everyone equally. For 38 minutes, Gull Cottage became a place people expected to be welcomed. Then Jonah appeared in the doorway with rain running from his beard. Alarm was telling the truth. "Loose belt. We're good." People carried their bowls to the sink without being asked. Len wiped the table. Faye left her spoon upside down beside the stove. As they returned to the ferry, Marisol paused at the porch door. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said. Nora looked at the wet floor, the empty pot, and the mugs waiting to be washed. "I didn't do anything." Marisol's eyes moved around the room. That's what Wade used to say. The ferry horn sounded. Jonah remained behind long enough to give Nora a small card with his number written on it. "Your tarp won't install itself," he said. "I was hoping it would read the room. Roof's too wet tonight. Saturday looks clear. I can't afford a carpenter. I'm not much of a carpenter on Saturdays. What does that cost?" He looked toward the kitchen, where the smell of chowder remained. 2 lunches, no paprika. After the ferry left, Nora washed 7 bowls and opened the guest book to a blank page. She wrote the date. Ferry delayed 38 minutes. Coffee week. Chowder survived. She hesitated, then added her name beneath it. That night, standing at the upstairs window where her phone found one narrow line of signal, Nora sent Jonah a message. "Does coffee count as one of the lunches?" His answer arrived before the signal vanished. "Not yours," Marisol warned me. By Friday, Nora had learned the ferry's moods. The morning run approached Belle Island from the south and gave 1 long horn if the captain could see the flag clearly. In fog, it gave 2. The evening run rode lower in the water with freight and tired people, and the ramp made a harder sound against the dock. She learned that Marisol drank coffee with no sugar. Len missed the morning run at least once a week, and Faye knitted only sleeves because she hated finishing sweaters. She learned where to stand in the passenger cabin to avoid the vibration that made her teeth feel loose. She learned that a ferry schedule was dependable without being obedient. Wind added minutes, freight added more. A passenger with 6 crates of turnips could reorder an entire morning. At the harbor house, Nora's hands remembered work faster than the rest of her did. On Thursday, she portioned fish and chopped herbs. On Friday, Tessa put her on chowder without supervision. "Don't get emotional about it," Tessa said. "Curtis has a dentist appointment." Curtis was standing beside them. "I can hear you." Then the anesthesia hasn't started. Nora worked until 3:30, carried restaurant scraps home for mackerel, and spent the evenings clearing the porch. She washed Wade's mugs, repaired the bench with 2 screws that did not match, and swept out enough pine needles to suggest a tree had lived there. She left the named hooks where they were. At night, she lay in Wade's bed and calculated. Ferry fare, fuel, food, taxes she had not yet allowed herself to investigate. The harbor house shift slowed the loss, but did not reverse it. Even with the generator running, the refrigerator stayed barely cold. The roof tarp represented money already spent and still folded uselessly on the porch. Saturday arrived clear and sharp, with wind driving the clouds inland. Jonah came off the morning ferry wearing work pants and carrying a tool bag, a coil of rope, and a thermos. "You brought coffee," Nora said. "I was given reason to prepare. Marisol had 1 cup. She has standards." Mackerel came down the dock to inspect him. Jonah crouched slowly and offered the back of his hand. The dog sniffed his fingers, then leaned his entire weight against Jonah's knee. "Traitor," Nora said. "He recognizes competence. He once ate a bar of soap." Maybe it was competent soap. Jonah examined the cottage roof from the yard. He walked the perimeter twice, looking up at the curled shingles and dark patches beneath the eaves. "This isn't a repair," he said. "I bought a tarp, not a cathedral. I'm setting expectations. I own a seasonal dwelling. My expectations have already been professionally lowered." They carried the ladder from the storage shed. 1 rung had split, and Wade had reinforced it with electrical tape. Jonah ran a thumb across the tape. No, it held him. Nothing held Wade. Gravity made suggestions. He used a shorter ladder from the ferry's maintenance locker, which he had brought after correctly predicting Wade's equipment. Nora held the base while he climbed to the porch roof, tested the shingles, and moved carefully toward the leak above the pantry. "Soft here," he called down. "How soft? Cake? Good cake? Funeral reception. Cake." Nora looked up at him. "That is specific and upsetting. It's a professional scale." They stretched the tarp across the worst section and secured it beneath the eaves. Nora climbed high enough to pass him rope and nails, but not high enough to see the full state of the roof. "Wade said it had another season," she said. "He said that last year." How long did he know? That it leaked? Forever. That it needed replacement? Probably 6 years. And you kept fixing pieces. He paid me in soup and insults. Terrible business model. "I was younger. You're 34. I was much younger." Nora held the ladder while Jonah climbed down. A streak of dirt crossed his forehead. Without the ferry coveralls, he looked less official and more tired. His left knee stiffened when he reached the ground. "You all right? Old injury?" From Wade's ladder? Different bad decision. He folded the excess tarp and checked the knots twice. Nora had made turkey sandwiches, potato salad from the restaurant's extra prep, and coffee strong enough to defend itself. She set everything on the porch table. Jonah took 1 sip. "This is hostile. You said mine didn't count." I wanted to understand why. He drank again. Scientific method. They ate with the porch windows open. Sun warmed the old boards, bringing out the smell of dust and pine resin. From the water came the low engine noise of a boat approaching too slowly. Nora leaned toward the window. The Mercy Ann entered the cove with Cal at the wheel. Its engine stumbled once before catching. Cal reduced speed near the dock and stared at Jonah's tools on the grass. He tied up at the inner cleat and climbed onto the stronger center boards without being told. "Company," he said. "Carpenter," Nora answered. "Ferry mechanic," Jonah said. "Cheap labor," Nora added. "I was told there'd be 2 lunches. You've had half of one." Cal looked from Jonah to the roof. "You put a tarp up. That's what the tarp was for. I told you I'd help with the shutters. You told me to check them. I meant I'd come out. You left that part in your head." Cal shoved his hands into the pockets of his work jacket. He looked toward the Mercy Ann when its engine gave a low, uneven knock. "That sounds healthy," Nora said. "It's cold. It's been running. It has opinions." Jonah glanced toward the boat, but did not volunteer one. Cal noticed the dock drawing on the table. "Outer brace is going?" "Yes," Nora said. I've got some pressure-treated boards behind the gear shed in town. Are they yours or Wade's? Mine? Actually yours. Cal's mouth tightened. Yes, Nora. She hated the note of suspicion in her own voice, mostly because she did not know how to remove it without pretending the past week had not happened. Jonah stood. I'll check the tarp from the north side. You don't have to leave, Nora said. I want to make sure the rope clears the stovepipe. His expression gave her nothing except the courtesy of space. Cal waited until the porch door closed behind him. Is that a thing? What? You and the ferry guy. He's installing a tarp. That wasn't my question. It's the answer you're getting. Cal picked up half of Jonah's sandwich, realized what he had done, and put it back. I came to see if you needed anything. Dean sent you. No? Nora waited. He asked me to talk to you, Cal admitted. That's not why I came. What does he want now? He's trying to plan the season. The June bird needs bookings in advance. I'm thrilled for her. He wants to know whether he can include island stops. No. You didn't even ask what he's offering. He offered to buy my home 3 hours after Grandpa's funeral. He's not talking about buying it, just docking for lunch tours. Couple days a week. Nora looked around the porch. Wade's mugs dried upside down on a towel. The hooks waited along the wall. Her name was the last one written in the guest book. This isn't an attraction. Grandpa let us bring people. Grandpa let everybody do everything, and then complained about it. Dean could pay you. How much? I don't know. So he sent you to negotiate an amount he didn't mention for access I haven't agreed to. Cal rubbed his jaw. When you say it like that, it sounds bad. I didn't arrange the words. It's a dock, Nora. We've used it our whole lives. You inherited a boat. I inherited the dock. I'm not trying to take it, then ask. I am asking. No, you're explaining why my no is inconvenient. Cal looked through the porch window toward the Mercy Ann. The boat rose and fell against the pilings, rubbing its fenders with a soft rubber squeak. You know what the first insurance payment is? He said. No. Neither did I until Wednesday. Nora said nothing. The transmission slips in reverse, he continued. 200 traps need new line. Half the gear Grandpa left me is older than I am, and Dean keeps saying we should combine the businesses. Like that means he books the trips and I repair everything. You wanted the boat. Yeah. Cal's voice dropped. I did. There was no accusation in it. That made it harder to answer. He took the sandwich again, this time deliberately, and ate the corner Jonah had not touched. Did Grandpa ever tell you about the ferry stop? Nora asked. No. I saw it come here. I figured he called when he needed it. So did I. Dean knew about the flag. He admitted that? Dean doesn't admit things. He said you were making a big deal out of public transportation. That sounded exactly like him. Cal finished the stolen sandwich. I can fix the rain barrels. They need fixing. One's split at the outlet. The other isn't connected. Nora looked through the window at the 2 barrels beside the cottage. She had not yet added them to a list. What do you want? Nothing? Everybody wants something. Cal glanced toward his boat. Let me tie up here when weather comes in. I won't bring customers, just the Mercy Ann. The request was practical. It was also the first time one of her brothers had acknowledged that the landing belonged to her. Ask before you come, Nora said. Every time? Until I trust you. Pain crossed his face before he covered it with irritation. That could take a while. I know, Cal nodded once. I'll bring fittings Tuesday. He left without saying goodbye to Jonah. The Mercy Ann hesitated when he shifted into reverse. The engine revved, but the boat barely moved. Cal swore, tried again, and backed away from the dock. Jonah returned to the porch as the boat cleared the cove. Stovepipe's safe, he said. You heard all of that. The windows are old. You could pretend. I'm a bad actor. Nora collected the plates. Was I unfair? Jonah considered before answering. Do you want me to say no? I want you to tell the truth. You were clear. People call women unfair when clear doesn't go their way. That sounded rehearsed. I have 3 sisters. They spent the afternoon bracing the porch bench and marking rotten dock boards with orange chalk. Jonah would not let Nora pay him. Instead, he took the remaining sandwiches and made her promise not to climb onto the roof alone. The next morning, a woman Nora did not recognize sat beside her on the ferry. She wore expensive sunglasses despite the fog, and held a glossy brochure from the June bird. Are you the woman at the island cottage? She asked. Nora looked at the brochure. Across the front, beneath a photograph of Dean smiling at the wheel, gold letters promised an authentic coastal lunch at Grandpa Bell's private island. "I'm the woman who owns it," Nora said. The passenger brightened. "Wonderful. We're booked for next Sunday." The woman's smile faded when Nora did not return it. "My husband arranged everything," she said. "Lunch, the cottage tour, time on the beach." There's no beach. "The brochure says secluded shoreline." That's rocks. The woman looked down at the photograph. Dean had taken it from the north side at low tide, where a narrow strip of pale gravel appeared between two granite ledges. "This is your island, isn't it?" "Yes." "And you don't know about the tour?" "I know about it now." Nora kept her voice level. The woman had paid for something in good faith. That did not make the thing hers, but it did make humiliation the wrong first response. "What's your name?" Nora asked. "Laurel Whitcomb." "Laurel, you need to call Dean. Tell him the island portion hasn't been authorized by the owner. He said it was a family property." "It was." Faye looked over the top of her knitting. Laurel lowered the brochure. "This is awkward. It's going to get more awkward before it improves." At the terminal, Nora walked directly toward the Junebird. Dean stood on the dock beside a folding sign advertising harbor cruises. He saw her coming and handed the sign to his deckhand. "Morning," he said. Nora held up Laurel's brochure. Dean's eyes flickered. "Where'd you get that?" "From a customer who says she's booked for next Sunday. That version wasn't supposed to be out yet." "Comforting." "It's one booking, it's 12 people. We cap island lunches at 12. "You cap them?" Dean glanced toward Laurel, who had emerged from the terminal and was pretending to study the tide chart. "Can we talk inside? The boat you inherited, or the island I inherited?" His jaw tightened. "You don't need to perform. I didn't print a costume." "Nora," Cal asked me. I said no. Cal did a terrible job explaining the proposal. He told me you wanted to bring customers to my dock several times a week. Which part did he get wrong? Dean took the brochure and folded it lengthwise. His photograph disappeared into the crease. "I'm offering you $200 per landing," he said. 3 hours, maximum. We bring the food, remove the trash, and carry our own liability coverage. Bathroom? What? 12 people for 3 hours. Are you bringing a bathroom? The cottage has one. The cottage has an old septic system that makes a noise when I wash dishes. We'll work around it. Porch? They'll eat there if the weather turns. Cottage tour? That's a walkthrough. 5 minutes. A walkthrough of my house, of Grandpa's cottage. Nora stared at him. Dean rubbed the back of his neck. "You know what I mean?" "Yes, I do." The Junebird shifted against its ropes. Its white paint shone. Even tied to the dock, it looked ready for photographs. $200 is fair, Dean said. "More than fair when I'm doing all the selling. You sold it before I agreed. I believed you'd see the benefit. You believed I'd need the money. You do need the money." The accuracy stung more than an insult would have. Dean softened his voice. "This helps both of us. You can't fix that place on restaurant wages. I can give you steady income without you doing anything. That's not the same as doing nothing. That's letting you sell access to my home. It's 3 hours. No." He looked at her for a long moment. "You haven't even thought about it." "I thought about it while you were telling a stranger she could tour my bedroom." The deckhand had moved farther down the dock. Laurel was now reading the same tide chart upside down. Dean stepped closer. "I already took a deposit," he said. "Let me honor this one, then we'll revisit. Refund it. It's not that simple." It was simple enough to take. Nora turned toward the restaurant. Behind her, Dean said, "Grandpa wanted that island used." She stopped but did not turn around. "Grandpa also wanted everybody to reuse bacon grease," she said. "We don't have to continue every tradition." On Tuesday, the Mercy Ann arrived with 2 rain barrel fittings, a bundle of hose, and Cal pretending he had not heard about the argument. He worked beside the cottage while Nora cleaned the porch windows. Every few minutes, the sound of metal striking metal came from the corner beneath the gutters, followed by language Wade would have respected. "How's Dean?" Nora asked through the open window. "Busy, sulking, busy, sulking." Cal tightened the new outlet on the first barrel. "He says you embarrassed him in front of a customer. He sold her a tour of my home. He says cottage tour means downstairs." "Oh, good. I sleep upstairs, so privacy lives." Cal snorted before he could stop himself. "Did you know he printed brochures?" "No." "Did you know he took a deposit?" "No." "Are you lying?" Cal set the wrench down. "No." Dean tells me plans after they become problems. The rain barrel stood crooked on its base. Cal wedged a flat stone beneath one side and tested it again. He'll probably show up Sunday, he said. I told him no. That doesn't always reach the part of Dean that moves his arms. Then I won't lower the dock ladder. The June bird's ramp reaches. Nora stopped wiping the glass. Are you warning me or helping him? I'm warning you. Why? Cal looked toward the Mercy Ann. Its transmission had fought him when he came in, requiring 2 bursts of throttle to move into reverse. The boat belonged to him now, but every bad sound still made him glance around as if Wade might hear. Because I should have warned you about the ferry, he said. It was not an apology. It was close enough to one that Nora did not push. Thank you for the barrels, she said. Ask me after they hold water. On Saturday evening, Dean sent a text. Tomorrow, 11:30, 1 landing only. I'll pay $300 for the inconvenience. Nora replied, Do not bring passengers to Belle Island. His answer did not come. At 11:20 Sunday morning, the June bird appeared beyond the southern point. Nora stood at the end of the dock in work boots and Wade's red flannel. She had given her harbor house shift to Curtis, who responded to the news of unexpected employment with the expression Tessa had described. The boat approached slowly. 12 adults lined the rails in windbreakers and sunglasses. Laurel stood beside a tall man with a camera. Dean was at the wheel, smiling the smile he used when he could feel money nearby. Nora did not wave. The June bird turned neatly in the cove. Dean's deckhand stepped forward with a line. No, Nora called. The passengers shifted. Dean leaned from the wheelhouse. We discussed this. I told you not to come. I texted you the arrangement. You texted me a sentence. Laurel looked at her husband. A woman near the stern removed her sunglasses. Dean's smile stayed in place, but the muscles beside it hardened. I have 12 guests on the water, he said. You put them there. Can we speak privately? We could have. Yesterday. A gust pushed the June bird sideways. The deckhand fended off with a boat hook. One of the passengers asked, Are we not getting off? Dean looked at Nora. For the first time, his confidence cracked enough for her to see what sat beneath it. Not shame. Fear. He had built the lunch into his new season. He had taken money he might not be able to return. The June bird gleamed, but it was hungry every hour it sat at the dock. Nora could refuse the landing. Dean would lose face in front of 12 strangers, exactly as he deserved. The strangers did not. She caught the line. 1 landing, she said quietly, because they didn't know. Relief flashed across Dean's face, followed so quickly by triumph that Nora nearly dropped the rope. The passengers came ashore. They spread over the cottage grounds as if the brochure had granted them square footage. Laurel apologized twice. Her husband photographed the outhouse before Nora told him it was the storage shed. 2 women walked through Wade's herb bed to reach the North Rocks. Another passenger opened the porch door and called, Is lunch in here? Dean's deckhand carried in coolers and folding trays. Dean directed Nora toward a box of lobster salad. Bowls are in the galley bag, he said. You said you brought the food. We did. You said I wouldn't do anything. I need you to portion. Miles has to stay with the boat. Nora looked at the guests removing their coats beneath Wade's handwritten names. 300, Dean said under his breath. She hated that she needed it. She hated more that he knew. Nora portioned lobster rolls, heated chowder, and made coffee. She did it well because doing it badly would punish the wrong people. Laurel offered to help carry plates. Len's hot sauce remained on the shelf from the ferry delay, and one guest put it on everything. Dean gave a short speech beside the porch windows. Our grandfather built this place with his own hands, he said. He had not. Wade bought the cottage from his uncle and replaced one wall. He taught us that the water isn't just where we make a living, it's who we are. The guests looked toward Nora, expecting agreement. She set down a basket of rolls. My grandfather hated the water, she said. He got seasick in a bathtub. A few people laughed uncertainly. Dean continued as though she had not spoken. After lunch, he led the group through the kitchen. Nora stood in the doorway to the hall. Downstairs only, she said. Dean's mouth tightened. Of course. He showed them Wade's stove, the old maps, and the marks on the pantry door where floodwater had reached during past storms. He told a story about spending summers on the island, but left out the part where Nora cooked while he took Grandpa's boat without permission. At 2:30, the passengers returned to the Junebird, carrying polite memories of a family day that had not existed. Laurel took Nora's hand before boarding. "I'm sorry," she said. "You didn't know. I think that might be the family motto." When the final passenger was aboard, Dean handed Nora an envelope. She did not take it. "You earned it," he said. "That's the problem. Nora, don't be dramatic." She looked back at the trampled herbs, the wet towels on the porch floor, and the closed door to Wade's room. This was the last time. "We'll improve the process." "There is no process. I have 3 more groups interested. Refund them." Dean's face hardened. "You'd rather work yourself sick than let me help you." "This isn't help. It's you finding another way to inherit my part." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Dean tucked the envelope into her shirt pocket with 2 fingers. "You always make things harder than they need to be," he said. Nora pulled out the envelope and placed it on the Junebird's deck. "You just make them harder for somebody else." She released the line. That evening, Elaine called while Nora scrubbed lobster salad from Wade's table. "Dean says you took his customers and then refused payment." Nora kept scrubbing. "Is that what you believe? I believe both of you are grieving. One of us printed brochures. He should have asked. He did ask. He asked after he sold it." Elaine sighed. "He says you made the whole afternoon uncomfortable." Nora looked around the empty porch. "No," she said. "I made it possible." She ended the call, locked the porch, and turned the sign she had painted that morning toward the dock. Private home. Ferry passengers welcome during delays. Below it, she added 4 more words. Tours by invitation only. Marisol read the sign from the wheelhouse the next morning. "Needs punctuation," she called down. Nora stepped onto the ramp. "It has 2 periods. Then I withdraw my criticism." Faye paused beside the sign, adjusted her glasses, and nodded. "Clear," she said. "People will hate it, thank you." That was a compliment. In the passenger cabin, nobody mentioned the Junebird. Nora almost preferred that someone ask. Silence left too much room for the version Dean was telling. She heard it at the harbor house before lunch. Tessa set a crate of celery on the prep table and said, "Your brother came by." "Which one?" "The shiny one." "What did he want?" "To know whether we'd be interested in catering his island packages." Nora stopped trimming leeks. "When?" "Before opening." "What did you say?" "I said, we don't cater domestic invasions." Despite herself, Nora laughed. Tessa pushed the celery toward her. "He said you agreed to the first lunch and changed your mind afterward." I caught his line because there were 12 people on a boat who thought they were expected. I assumed there was a less stupid version. He put $300 in an envelope. "You take it?" "No." Tessa stared at her over the rim of her glasses. "You need $300. "I know. That makes giving it back either principled or ridiculous." "I'm hoping for both." Tessa began chopping celery. "Principles are expensive. People leave that out of the advertising." At noon, Marisol came in for takeout chowder. She stood at the kitchen door in uniform while Tessa filled 2-quart containers. "5 crew today?" Tessa asked. "6. Jonah's pretending he doesn't want lunch. Charge him anyway." Marisol looked toward Nora. "Yesterday go well?" "If your definition of well includes no maritime casualties." "Mine often does." Tessa set the containers on the counter. "She said there was interest in your chowder." Marisol opened one lid, inspected the contents, and closed it again. "The Ferry concession buys soup twice a week during the shoulder season," she said. "Current supplier thinks salt is a personality." Nora looked at Tessa. "You have a concession? I have a kitchen, insurance, and enough forms to build a small shelter. You never mentioned it." "I'm mentioning it now." Marisol tapped the lid. "We need 24 portions Tuesdays and Fridays. Nothing fancy. Chowder, lentil, chicken stew. Something people can eat from a paper cup while regretting the weather." Tessa folded her arms. "Nora can handle production. I already work 4 days. You can prep during your existing shift. I pay you an extra 2 hours per batch. That sounds suspiciously like money. Don't get attached." Nora looked at Marisol. "Does the crew have to eat it?" "We're not required. We're weak." The first batch was due Friday. 24 portions did not rescue Gull Cottage. It paid for ferry fare, groceries, and some of the gasoline the generator consumed as if holding a personal grudge. Still, when Nora wrote her name beside Tessa's on the production sheet, the act felt more solid than Dean's cash in her pocket would have. Cal returned to Belle Island with the rain barrel fittings tightened and 4 pressure-treated boards laid across the Mercy Ann's stern. "I thought those were behind your shed," Nora said. "They were. You need them?" "Eventually." "That's not an answer. They're mine. You can have them." Nora inspected the boards. "What do you want?" Cal stepped onto the dock and looked toward the cove, where wind had begun roughening the water. "Same thing I said. Permission to tie up when the weather turns. Not customers, no customers, not Dean. I don't own Dean. He behaves like public infrastructure, so it's easy to get confused." Cal hid a smile by bending for the first board. They replaced 3 marked planks along the center path. The 4th went beneath the outer corner as a temporary brace. Cal worked quickly, but not carelessly. Wade had taught him how to set a nail without splitting damp wood, how to read rot by color, and how to throw his weight against a warped board until it surrendered. Nora brought him coffee on the dock. He took 1 sip and made a face. "Did you boil a wallet?" Jonah said something similar. "Jonah spends time here now?" "He's been here twice." "So, yes." Nora leaned against a piling. "You and Dean inherited boats. Did I inherit the family's concern about my romantic life?" "We're making conversation. You never asked about my romantic life before. You didn't live on an island with a man visiting to secure your roof. He left. Good roofers do." The Mercy Ann knocked against its fenders. Cal looked at the water rather than at Nora. "Dean says I'm taking your side," he said. "Are you?" "I'm fixing the dock." "That wasn't my question." He scraped mud from the sole of his boot with a screwdriver. "I told him he was wrong to bring people after you said no." Nora waited. "He said, I'm only defending you because I want free access." "Do you?" "Not free. I brought boards. That's not a payment. That's you admitting the dock needs to stay attached if you want to use it." Cal nodded slowly. "Okay, what's fair?" The question startled her. Fair had been announced at Wade's kitchen table, as though the word became true when Elaine said it. "Fix the barrels," Nora said. "Help with the weak dock boards when you can. Ask before you tie up." "And later?" "We decide later." Cal held out his hand. "What are we doing?" she asked. "Making it official without papers." She shook his hand. His palm was rough and smelled of pressure-treated lumber. For a second, he looked amused. Then his phone rang. Dean's name lit the screen. Cal let it ring twice before answering. "Yeah." Dean's voice carried from the phone, loud enough for Nora to hear the shape but not the words. "I'm at the island," Cal said. Another burst of speech. "Because her rain barrels were busted." Cal looked toward Nora. "No, I'm not asking permission to fix rain barrels." Dean spoke longer this time. Cal's shoulders tightened. She said, "No, Dean. That means stop selling it." The line went silent. "I know you heard me." Cal ended the call. Nora did not thank him. Gratitude would have made the moment smaller. Instead, she handed him the hammer. "The outer board still moves," she said. "Yeah." They went back to work. By Friday, the weather radio had begun repeating the same warning every 15 minutes. Strong southeast winds, reduced visibility. Ferry operations subject to delay or cancellation. Nora woke before her alarm to the sound of the tarp snapping against the roof. The blue flag strained so hard against its line that she could not raise it. She stood on the dock until spray soaked the knees of her jeans, searching the channel for lights that did not appear. At 6:45, her phone rang near the upstairs window. Marisol's voice broke through the weak signal. "Morning run's canceled. When will you know about the next one?" "When the wind tells me. I have work, I know." Nora looked toward the mainland, invisible behind gray rain. "Can you come in closer to the north side?" "No." The answer was immediate without apology. "Okay. I'm sorry, Nora. We don't bargain with crosswinds." After the call, Nora stood beside the window, holding the silent phone. Dean had been wrong about many things. He had not been wrong that the ferry could fail to arrive. She called Tessa. The connection dropped once before the restaurant answered. "I can't get off the island," Nora said. "Then don't." "The soup batch is due. I'll do it. You have lunch prep." "I've worked in my own kitchen before. I'm losing a shift." Also true. The honesty stung, but Nora was grateful Tessa did not cover it with encouragement. The generator failed at 10, not the wire this time. It had run out of gasoline a day before the freight delivery. Nora moved the refrigerator food into the cooler and set it on the porch. She lit the propane stove, then discovered the lighter was nearly empty. Rain found a path beneath the tarp and began dripping into Wade's bedroom. Nora placed a bowl beneath it. By noon, the porch windows were fogged. Mackerel refused to go outside until she put on Wade's raincoat and stood in the yard with him. The dog completed his business, looked at the storm, and returned to the cottage with the speed of religious conversion. Nora spent the afternoon reading old Ferry schedules and listening to the wind test Jonah's knots. The quiet change when leaving was not her choice. By dusk, she had eaten crackers for dinner, lost a day's wages, and used 3 pots to catch water. She stood beside the cold refrigerator and considered calling Dean. The Junebird was built for passengers. Dean might come if she admitted she needed him. He might also remind her forever. Nora took the phone upstairs, looked at his name, and called Cal instead. "You all right?" he asked. "Fine. That word sounds strange from you. Do you have gasoline?" "Yeah. Can you bring some when the weather drops?" "Not tonight, I know. Tomorrow morning if the cove's safe. I can pay. We'll add it to the dock deal." Nora closed her eyes. "Thank you. You still have propane?" "Yes. Food? Yes. Roof? Mostly." Cal was quiet. "That tarp should hold," he said. Jonah ties knots like he expects judgment. The ferry horn came faintly through the fog at 9 the next morning. The resumed run brought gasoline, groceries, and her first 2 chowder containers packed by Tessa. It also brought Jonah, who checked the roof before saying hello, and Marisol, who carried a glass jar onto the porch. "What's that?" Nora asked. "Coffee money. I'm not charging people during breakdowns." "You're not. They're contributing to avoid drinking your cheapest brand." Marisol set the jar beneath the mugs. A handwritten label read, "Coffee, soup, dry socks, bad advice." By the end of the week, it contained $6.40 and a Canadian coin nobody claimed. The mail arrived with Friday's freight. Nora opened the county envelope at Wade's kitchen table. The property tax amount sat near the bottom in clean black numbers, followed by an insurance notice requiring roof and dock repairs before renewal. She placed the $6.40 beside both bills. Mackerel rested his chin on her knee. Nora rubbed the soft space between his ears. "Well," she said, looking toward the porch jar, "we can afford 1 nail." The nail turned out to cost 39 cents. Nora bought 12. She put the rest of her Harbor House pay toward the tax bill and moved the insurance notice from the kitchen table to the mantel, where it could threaten her from a less useful location. The porch jar reached $21.85 before Marisol added a second label. "This is not a bank." "Who thought it was?" Nora asked. "Len borrowed $10 for ferry fare. Did he pay it back?" 11. "Then we made interest." "Careful. That's how institutions begin." The ferry chowder brought Nora 2 extra paid hours on Tuesdays and Fridays. She prepared it in the Harbor House kitchen, where Tessa could supervise the paperwork without supervising Nora. The first batch sold out. The second left 4 portions because the weather was warm. Tessa poured those into a container and sent them home with Nora. "Don't celebrate inventory," she said. "I wasn't?" "You looked proud. I was checking whether the potatoes sank." "They did." "Stay humble." The money helped, but helping was not the same as solving. Nora made a calendar of every payment due and hung it inside the pantry, where Mackerel was the only creature likely to judge it. Dean chose the following Monday to walk into the restaurant with an offer. He waited until Nora had finished the lunch rush. His Junebird shirt was clean, his hair was combed, and he carried a single sheet of paper instead of an envelope. "I'm not doing business in Tessa's kitchen," Nora said. "We can sit outside. I have onions to chop." Tessa pointed her knife toward the back door. "The onions have been through enough." Nora followed Dean to the picnic table beside the dumpsters. The harbor breeze changed direction halfway there, replacing salt air with the warm smell of old shellfish. Dean set the paper between them. The number at the top was larger than anything Nora had owned and smaller than the island would be worth to him once his lunches were running. It would pay the taxes, clear her credit card, and put a deposit on a small apartment. She could return to full-time work without planning her life around wind. Dean had included the cottage furnishings, dock, and existing hospitality contents, a phrase apparently meant to cover Wade's chipped mugs. "You had somebody write this," she said. "I typed it. That's why hospitality is spelled wrong." He looked at the page. "Where?" She did not tell him. "It's a real offer," he said. "No games?" "You booked tours after I said no." That's over. Because I stopped it. Fine. You stopped it. I'm offering another solution. Nora read the number again. Dean leaned forward. You're losing money every week you stay out there. I'm not saying that to hurt you. What happens to the cottage? Renovate it. Keep the original character. Which means new kitchen, proper bathrooms, deck, guest rooms. Something usable. It's usable now. You know what I mean? Again. Dean had spent years using that sentence as a bucket over anything he did not want to name. You mean profitable? Nora said. Yes. Is that a crime? No. Then why are you acting like I want to bulldoze Grandpa? Because you keep selling him by the portion. Dean pushed the paper closer. Take a week. Talk to whoever you want. I'm not your enemy. Nora folded the offer and put it in her apron pocket. I didn't say you were. The relief on his face made her wish she had left it on the table. That evening, Jonah inspected the roof from the yard, the porch roof, and finally the ladder. He refused to climb until the shingles dried. Best case? Nora asked. We replace the north slope and repair around the chimney before fall. South side might hold another winter. Might? You want accuracy or bedtime? Accuracy. It might. He wrote figures beside a materials list. Nora watched the total climb past every dollar she expected to earn before summer ended. I have 12 nails, she said. That changes everything. Can any of this wait until spring? The water won't. Nora sat on the porch step. Jonah remained standing, giving her room to absorb the numbers. Dean made an offer. He capped his pen. Good one? Good enough to stop having roof conversations? That's something. She looked up. You think I should sell? I think you should decide whether you want a house or whether you feel obligated to prove you can survive one. That's annoyingly reasonable. I can be worse if you need. You're supposed to tell me the place is special. The place is damp. Special doesn't change flashing. His refusal to rescue the island with sentiment made her trust him more than encouragement would have. Jonah sat beside her, leaving a board's width between them. If you sell, he said, Dean gets what he wants. Exactly. That's a bad reason to stay. It's also a bad reason to sell. Exactly. Mackerel eased himself down between them, fitting his body into the narrow space Jonah had left. Jonah rubbed the dog's chest. Wade knew people would come when he raised the flag, Nora said. He never told me that. He left me this place like it was an answer to a question I hadn't asked. Wade thought explanation weakened a gift. Did he tell you that? No. He gave me a broken circular saw once. A radio crackled from Jonah's belt. Marisol's voice told him the ferry would depart in 10 minutes. He stood, knees popping. I know a contractor replacing a restaurant deck in town, he said. Half the boards are sound. He'll sell them cheap if someone pulls the nails. How cheap? He likes chowder. Everybody likes chowder until they have to eat enough to rebuild a roof. Dock first. Roof still costs money. There was no hidden answer, only smaller answers, each with work attached. Nora walked him to the ferry. Before he stepped onto the ramp, Jonah looked toward the cottage. Don't sign anything because you're scared of a rain cloud. What should I be scared of? November. The Mercy Ann called her on the radio 2 evenings later. Cal's voice came through beneath static. Belle Island, you there? Nora picked up the handset Wade had kept on the kitchen wall. I'm here. Fog's closing fast. I'm half a mile south. Can I tie up for an hour? He had asked. Nora looked outside. The cove was already disappearing behind white air. Yes. Inner side. Outer corners still weak. Copy. The Mercy Ann arrived at idle speed, its shape forming slowly from the fog. Cal tied up, checked both lines, and carried a paper sack to the cottage. Payment, he said. Inside were 2 haddock fillets wrapped in butcher paper. I thought we agreed on rain barrels. We did. This is because I caught too many. Fish don't work that way. They do when they won't fit in my freezer. Cal saw Dean's folded offer on the mantel. Nora had not hidden it. She had also not expected him to recognize it from 6 feet away. He gave you the number, Cal said. You knew? He asked what I thought the island was worth. What did you say? I said I didn't know. Did you? No. Cal moved closer to the mantel but did not touch the paper. He needs the landing, he said. The Junebird's summer bookings are down. Private lunches were supposed to be the new thing. That sounds like a reason to offer more. He doesn't have more. Nora took a skillet from the hook above the stove. Are you telling me not to sell? Cal leaned against the counter. If you sell, Dean probably lets me use the dock when I want. Might even pay me to bring lobsters for the tours. So, you benefit. Yeah, she waited. I still think you should only sell if you want to leave. It was the closest anyone in her family had come to separating her interests from their own. Nora heated butter in the skillet. You can have one fillet. They're both mine. The dock fee increased. They ate fish at the porch table while fog pressed against the windows. Cal showed her how Wade had once sorted freight there, setting boxes beneath the named hooks so people from smaller nearby islands could collect them by skiff. He never charged, Cal said. He should have. Sometimes they left food, sometimes fuel. That explains the canned beets. Nothing explains the canned beets. The next ferry brought 3 packages for Faye and a coil of marine rope for Len. Marisol set them on the porch without asking, then paused. Wade used to hold small freight here when the outer run couldn't make every landing, she said. You want me to stop? Nora looked at the boxes. Do they know I'm not Wade? Faye knows everybody's not Wade. She considers it a widespread failure. Nora cleared a shelf and wrote the recipients' names on paper. Faye collected her packages that afternoon and placed $5 in the jar. That's too much for storage, Nora said. It includes coffee. You didn't drink coffee. I enjoy options. Before leaving, Faye inspected the staircase. You still have the room upstairs? It's full of dead moths. There are 2 women coming in June for the coastal bird survey. Grown professionals. Quiet unless they see a warbler. I'm not running an inn. You have a bed? Yes. A roof? Parts of one. Then you're halfway there. The upstairs room had not been used since Nora was 19. She found a rusted bed frame, a dresser missing one knob, and enough dead insects to support Faye's assessment. The window faced east over the channel. From there, Nora could see the ferry's white shape long before it turned toward the flag. She spent 3 evenings cleaning. Tessa donated 2 plain sheets from a restaurant linen order that had arrived in the wrong size. Cal repaired the dresser drawer. Jonah brought 4 salvage deck boards and left them beside the dock after Nora traded the contractor 6 quarts of chowder and 2 loaves of bread. The bird survey women booked 4 nights. Their names were Mina Shaw and Joe Alvarez. They arrived carrying binoculars, waterproof notebooks, and their own coffee. We heard yours is dangerous, Mina said. Only in enclosed spaces. The room payment covered the insurance inspection fee and the first load of roofing felt. Nothing more. Nora took Dean's offer from the mantel and moved it into the pantry beside the calendar. She did not sign it. She did not tear it up. On the first night Mina and Joe slept upstairs, Nora made a bed on the parlor sofa. The mattress was thin, Mackerel snored near her feet, and the guests laughed softly overhead about a bird Nora had never heard of. Gull Cottage had earned enough to repair one small piece of itself. That was not safety. It was a beginning. The beginning woke Nora at 4:40 in the morning. A floorboard creaked overhead, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone knocking over the upstairs washstand. Mackerel rose from beside the sofa and barked at the ceiling. We're fine, Mina called softly. A second voice said, We are not completely fine. Nora pulled on Wade's flannel and found Joe kneeling beside the washstand with a towel. Water spread beneath the dresser. I thought the pitcher was empty, Joe said. It was until I filled it. Why did you fill it? For you. That was thoughtful and badly timed. Mina stood by the east window with binoculars already around her neck. There's a black-throated blue warbler in the spruce. Joe looked at Nora. She woke me by saying that sentence directly into my face. Mina pointed toward the window. You're going to want to see this. Nora did not know whether she wanted to see it, but she looked. The bird was smaller than the phrase suggested. It moved between branches in brief, nervous jumps, blue-black feathers catching the early light. People come all this way for that? Nora asked. Mina smiled. People go farther for less. The washstand water stained one floorboard, but the ceiling below did not leak. Nora counted that as successful hospitality. Over 4 days, Mina and Joe left before dawn, returned muddy, and filled the porch with stories about creatures Nora had apparently lived beside without noticing. They paid the agreed amount, added $10 for the washstand incident, and asked to reserve the same week the following year. You should charge more, Tessa said when Nora told her. They brought their own towels. You are not pricing towels. You are pricing privacy and a view. The dresser sticks. Atmosphere. The roof is covered by a tarp. coastal atmosphere. Nora raised the rate by $12 and felt like a criminal. The spruce tips hardened from bright green to dark. Harbor traffic thickened. The ferry carried coolers, folding chairs, grocery boxes, and adults dressed for weather that existed only in their vacation plans. Gull Cottage found a rhythm. Small freight waited on the port shelves beneath handwritten names. The coffee jar paid for coffee, propane, and dry socks bought on sale. The upstairs room was occupied 8 nights in June and 11 in July. Nora spent more time washing sheets than she had anticipated, and less time imagining she was running an inn. She still worked 4 days at the harbor house. Twice a week, her chowder traveled on the ferry in insulated containers marked with Tessa's name and Nora's initials. Marisol reported sales with unnecessary drama. Lentil moved slowly. It's 80 degrees. Soup must transcend conditions. Tell the passengers to suffer more. I'll make an announcement. Nothing expanded quickly enough to become easy. A guest broke a lamp. The generator consumed a belt. The porch screen tore. The property taxes did not become impressed by Nora's effort and reduced themselves. But the north roof stopped leaking. Jonah, Nora, and 2 men from the deck contractor spent 3 Saturdays replacing the worst sheathing and shingles. Nora paid for materials and pieces. The contractor accepted lunches and money, with a strong preference for money. Jonah accepted neither until Nora threatened to report him to Marisol for unauthorized generosity. "Report me for what?" he asked from the roof. "Interfering with commerce. That's federal." "Good. I want it taken seriously." He finally agreed to let her pay for his ferry fare and feed him. Cal arrived during the second Saturday with a load of dock boards and found Jonah stripping shingles. The 2 men looked at each other across the yard. "I heard you were cheap labor," Cal said. "I heard your transmission slips." Cal looked at Nora. "You told him?" The engine told him, loudly. They worked together with the careful civility of men who had not decided whether they liked each other. By lunch, they were arguing about marine sealant. By late afternoon, Jonah had offered to look at the Mercy Ann's gearbox, and Cal had called his roof knots excessive. Nora watched them from the ladder and felt an unexpected ache. It was not because 2 men were helping her. It was because this was how family work had been described all her life. Everyone showing up, everybody carrying something, Wade directing from a chair. She had somehow missed that version while doing the work nobody photographed. Jonah climbed down beside her. "What?" he asked. "Nothing." "You're holding a hammer like it insulted you." She loosened her grip. "I'm fine. That word sounds strange from you." Cal said that. "He's right. Don't encourage him." That evening, after Cal left, Jonah found the nursing school brochure while helping Nora move one of her boxes away from the newly repaired wall. The cover showed a woman in blue scrubs smiling down at a clipboard. Nobody had ever looked that pleased by a clipboard in Wade's house. "You applying?" Jonah asked. "I was." He waited. "Before Grandpa got worse," Nora said. "I took prerequisites, then I missed one deadline, then another. It got embarrassing to keep telling people I was still planning." Jonah put the brochure back without smoothing it or offering inspiration. "Do you still want it?" "I don't know. That's allowed. It doesn't feel allowed. Most useful things don't." He carried the box across the room. The conversation ended there, but the question remained without becoming a command. Dean came to Belle Island on the first Monday in August. He arrived alone in the Junebird and did not radio first. Nora heard the engines while changing the upstairs sheets. By the time she reached the dock, he had tied to the inner side. "You're supposed to ask," she said. "I'm your brother," Cal asks. Cal apparently has a membership. He repairs things. Dean looked down at the replaced boards. "With my lumber?" "His lumber." "Grandpa bought those boards." Cal said they were his. "Of course he did." Dean carried a leather folder under one arm. His eyes moved toward the cottage, taking in the repaired roof, clean porch windows, and small sign offering coffee during ferry delays. "You've been busy," he said. Nora could not tell whether it was praise. "Do you want coffee? Is it safe?" "No." He followed her to the porch anyway. Dean stopped at the freight shelves. A box marked Faye sat beneath the named hooks. Clean mugs hung beside the stove. The guest book lay open to an entry praising Nora's fish stew and insulting the mattress. "You turned it into a business," he said. "I rented one room. You acted like I was desecrating the place by bringing paying guests. You brought them into my home after I told you not to. And now strangers sleep upstairs. Because I invite them. Dean walked to the guest book and read the most recent page. Everybody in town thinks you're preserving Grandpa's legacy, and I'm selling it. Did everybody in town say that? Enough people. Maybe stop asking. He turned. You use his name too. Where? The cottage, the porch, the stories. You think those Ferry people come because of you? The question found its target, though Nora wished it had not. No, she said. They came because of him. They come back because the flag is raised and the coffee's hot. Dean gave a humorless laugh. You've been here 3 months, long enough to know who asked permission. He opened the leather folder and removed another copy of the offer. The number had not changed. This expires Friday. Nora went into the pantry and returned with the folded original. She placed it on top of his clean copy. I'm not selling. Dean stared at the 2 sheets. Because of a few room rentals? Because I don't want to. That's not a plan. It's an answer. His face changed slowly. The salesman left first. What remained looked older than 36. You think I got the easy part, he said. I think you got what you wanted. The Junebird costs me $600 before it leaves the dock some days. Wade deferred engine work for 2 years. Bookings are down, fuel is up, and every person in town has an opinion about how he would have run it. Then sell it. Dean's eyes sharpened. You know I can't. Why not? Because he left it to me. The symmetry hung between them. Nora sat on the porch bench. Dean remained standing. Maybe he didn't know us as well as he thought, she said. He knew you'd hold on to anything he gave you. He knew you would too. Dean looked toward the harbor. Difference is, your island doesn't sink if the engine quits. No, it rots standing still. For a moment, Nora thought he might sit beside her. Instead, he gathered both copies of the offer. Cal says I should stop pushing. He's right. He says that a lot lately. Maybe listen before the novelty wears off. Dean walked back to the dock. He did not say goodbye. The Junebird's engine started with a deep vibration Nora felt through the porch floor. One engine smoked briefly before clearing. Jonah noticed the same smoke the following week. He and Nora stood on the terminal dock, waiting for the evening ferry, while Dean loaded passengers for a sunset cruise. Port engines running rich, Jonah said. Is that bad? It's not good. Those sound like different answers. They are. Dean saw them looking and closed the engine hatch. By September, the Junebird ran 2 trips most clear days. Dean added wine cruises, lighthouse loops, and private charters that returned after dark. Cal began turning down his requests for help because the Mercy Ann's transmission had finally gone into the shop. He wants me as deckhand for free, Cal told Nora, while replacing the last split rain barrel hose. Calls it combining operations. You could charge him dock rates, he'd pay in brochures. The first cold nights arrived before the leaves changed. Nora moved the guest room blankets from the cedar chest and stocked extra lamp oil. The porch jar bought a second-hand radio after the old kitchen set began losing the Weather Channel. On an October Thursday, the forecast warned of a fast-moving coastal storm expected Saturday night. Nora heard it while portioning chicken stew at the harbor house. Dean came through the kitchen door carrying a box of bottled water. Tessa said I could store this in the walk-in until Saturday, he said. Nora looked at the box. What's Saturday? Private charter? 6 people. In that forecast, it's not supposed to hit until late. Tessa emerged from the pantry. I told him he could store water, not bad judgment. Dean ignored her. Cal's coming as deckhand, he said, so everybody can relax. Nora set down the ladle. Does Cal know that? He will. Outside, beyond the kitchen windows, the harbor lay flat and bright beneath a sky with no visible reason to be feared. Cal doesn't know, Nora said. Dean shifted the bottled water against his hip. I was going to call him. You told me he was coming. He will. He has a boat in the shop and his own work. He's my brother. That sentence has done a lot of damage this year. Tessa took the box from Dean and set it on the floor. How far are you going? Outer lighthouse, then dinner loop through the bay. We'll be back by 6. The warning starts at 4, Nora said. The watch starts at 4. Warning isn't until later. You found the optimistic part of the weather. Dean's mouth tightened. I've run this route for 9 years. With Grandpa's engine. With my engine. The port side was smoking last week. It was a clogged injector. It's fixed. Nora looked at him. Dean had always become calmer when he was lying to himself. His voice smoothed, his shoulders lowered. He could make worry look childish simply by standing near it. Cancel, she said. 6 people booked this months ago. Then they can book again. They're here for 1 weekend. Storms are rude that way. Dean picked up the water again. I don't need permission from the family weather committee. He left through the back door. Tessa watched him cross the parking lot. You want me to refuse the cooler? He'll buy ice somewhere else. True? Nora returned to the stew. The ladle struck the side of the pot harder than she intended. Cal called 12 minutes later. I just heard, he said. From Dean, from Tessa. Tessa leaned toward the phone. You're welcome. Nora moved away from the stove. Are you going? No. Good. He says the charter cancels if I don't. That's why he told me you were already coming. Cal swore softly. He knows the port engine's bad, Nora said. It's not bad. It's overdue for work. Those sound different only to boat people. The starboard can bring them home. In a storm? Cal did not answer. Nora could picture him at the repair shop beside the Mercy Ann, transmission pieces spread across a workbench. He wanted Dean to face the consequences of his own decisions. He also knew 6 strangers would share them. I'm not going, Cal repeated, but with less certainty. You don't owe him free labor. I know. If you go, charge him. For a funeral, Cal. Bad joke. Very. He exhaled. I'll call you. The evening ferry carried Nora home beneath a sky streaked with high white clouds. On the horizon, darker weather pressed up from the southeast. Marisol left the wheelhouse after the ferry cleared the harbor. She sat across from Nora, still wearing her uniform jacket. What's your fuel? She asked. Generator can is full. Propane's half. Food? Enough. Radio batteries, new, lanterns, 2 electric, 1 oil. Marisol nodded. Saturday evening run may not go. Sunday morning's questionable. I heard. You alone? Mackerel? He's steadier than most people. The dog had not been on the ferry since Nora moved to the island, but his reputation had somehow traveled. Jonah came up from below and handed her a coil of thin line. For the port shutters, he said. The north latch is weak. Cal said that. Cal's right. Everyone's having a wonderful week. Jonah crouched beside her seat. If the tarp starts lifting, don't climb up. Tie the loose edge from the ground if you can. If you can't, let it go. It cost $89, then wave goodbye respectfully. Nora wound the rope around her hand. You working Saturday? Maintenance standby. Ferry doesn't run. We still sit there and look useful. Important work. Years of training. His hand rested briefly over hers as he showed her a knot. Neither of them moved for half a second longer than the lesson required. Then Marisol said, I can see both of you. Jonah released the rope. I was demonstrating, he said, slowly. Nora looked out the window so Marisol would not see her smile. At Belle Island, Jonah secured the outer port shutter before the ferry left. Nora watched from the dock as the boat turned into the channel. Its lights receded toward town, dependable but not permanent. She spent Friday preparing. The guest room linens went into the cedar chest. Freight packages were moved from the porch floor to higher shelves. She filled jugs with water, tested the radios, brought firewood inside, and cooked a pot of chicken stew large enough to suggest she expected the weather to bring an army. Mackerel followed until the activity exhausted him. He lay beneath the kitchen table, with his nose on his paws, while Nora checked the pantry. Crackers, beans, flour, mustard. His eyebrows moved. 3 kinds. Were safe. Saturday morning arrived warm enough to feel dishonest. The ferry completed the 7:03 run, but Nora did not board. Marisol lowered the ramp only long enough to drop 2 bags of ice and a sealed container from Tessa. The container held biscuits. Written across the lid in black marker were the words, for weather or feelings. Last runs moved to 2, Marisol said. After that, we're suspending. Dean still going out? The June bird left the harbor 20 minutes ago. Nora looked south. The island hid the outer channel. Marisol's jaw tightened. Cal's aboard. Of course he was. The ferry pulled away. Nora carried the ice and biscuits to the cottage, angry with Cal for going and relieved that he had. At noon, the wind began shifting. The air smelled metallic. Clouds moved across the water in low, separate layers, one direction near the horizon and another overhead. Nora radioed the June bird. Dean answered after the 3rd call. Belle Island, go ahead. Where are you? Near the lighthouse. The weather's moving faster. We see it. What time are you coming back? A pause. 5. The ferry suspended at 2. We're not the ferry. No, the ferry canceled. Cal's voice sounded faintly behind Dean's. Then Dean said, We're fine, Nora. The radio clicked off. At 2:15, rain reached the island. It came lightly at first, darkening the dock boards in spots. By 3, the north shutters strained against Jonah's lines. The blue flag snapped so hard, Nora lowered it to keep the cloth from tearing. She turned on the weather radio. The storm had accelerated. Wind warnings expanded across the bay. The announcer's calm voice made each update feel less negotiable. At 3:40, Cal called, We're heading in. Nora gripped the kitchen handset. Where are you? East of the outer bell. That's not close. No. Wind tore at his voice. In the background, an engine labored unevenly. What's wrong? Port engine's losing pressure. Can you make the harbor? Maybe. Dean came on. We can. Cal's voice returned, sharper. Stop saying that, like it changes the gauge. The transmission filled with static. Bell Island is closer, Nora said. Dean answered. We don't need to stop. A metallic alarm began sounding behind him. Cal swore. The radio went dead. For the next 20 minutes, Nora heard nothing. She moved through the cottage with no task that lasted more than seconds. Check the stove, check the dock lines, check the radio volume. Let Mackerel outside, then immediately called him back, though he had not left the porch. The rain thickened until the channel disappeared. At 4:12, the radio crackled. Bell Island, June bird. Nora grabbed the handset. I'm here. Cal's voice was tight. Port engines down, starboard temperatures climbing. We're 5 miles south-southeast of you. Can you reach the cove if we keep her slow? Dean came on. We have passengers cold, 1 sick. How many? 6. Life jackets? Yes, keep them on, we know. Then why did I have to ask? Cal took the radio back. Nora, can you light the landing? The question steadied her. Yes, both dock lanterns. Oil one at the porch if you still have it. We may come from the south and turn late, channel markers disappearing. Nora pulled on Wade's raincoat and rubber boots. She filled the old lantern, lit it in the kitchen, and carried it to the porch hook. The electric lanterns went to the end of the dock, one tied to each piling. Wind shoved at her back. The cove water rose in short, angry peaks that broke against the rocks. From the dock, she could hear an engine. Not see it, hear it. A low mechanical struggle came through the rain, disappearing whenever the wind turned. Nora lifted the radio. I hear you, Cal answered. We can't see the landing. I'm at the end. Use your flashlight toward the south point. Short flashes. Don't blind us. She aimed into the rain and flashed 3 times. Nothing. Again. A white navigation light appeared, vanished, then appeared closer. The June bird emerged at an angle, bow rising hard. Its running lights blurred in the water. Dean stood at the wheel. Cal was beside him, one hand braced against the console. The passengers sat low in the cabin, wearing orange life jackets. You're too far east, Nora said into the radio. There are rocks off your port side. We know where the rocks are, Dean answered. The boat drifted toward them anyway. Cal shoved past him and took the wheel. Starboard 10, Nora said. Now straight. The outer piling is lit. The June bird limped into the cove on one engine. Wind pushed its stern sideways. Nora moved to the inner cleat with the dock line ready. Cal threw too short. The rope landed in the water. Dean reversed. The engine screamed, and the boat barely responded. Again, Nora shouted. Cal pulled the line back, coiled it, and threw. This time, Nora caught it around her forearm. The weight yanked her toward the dock edge. She dropped to one knee, wrapped the rope around the cleat, and held until Cal secured the stern. The June bird struck the fenders hard enough to shake the dock. 3 at a time, Nora called, center boards only. The first passengers crossed with heads down. Laurel Whitcomb was among them, soaked beneath a yellow jacket. Her husband carried his camera under his shirt. I think your brother owes you another apology, Laurel said through chattering teeth. Get inside. Nora moved all 6 passengers into the porch, took wet coats, and put the stew on the stove. Mackerel stood in the kitchen doorway, barking once at each arrival, as though counting. Cal came in last, except for Dean. Blood ran from a scrape across his knuckles. You okay? Nora asked. Yeah. Is the boat secure? 4 lines. She'll hold if the dock does. The cottage shook under a gust. Dean stepped through the porch door, rain pouring from his hair and jacket. He looked at the labeled hooks, the steaming windows, the bowls Nora had already set on the table. For once he had no prepared sentence. Nora handed him a towel. "Close the door," she said. "You're letting the weather in." Dean closed the door. Water pooled around his boots. Nora handed him a second towel for the floor. "Start there," she said. He stared at it, then crouched and wiped up the rain. The 6 passengers occupied every dry surface in the porch. Laurel and her husband sat beneath Faye's hook. A man named Roger had been sick over the side of the Junebird and now shivered beneath 2 wool blankets near the stove. His partner, Denise, held a bowl of stew under his nose while he insisted he could not eat. "You don't have to eat," she told him. "You have to hold it so I feel useful." Roger accepted this arrangement. The other passengers were 2 sisters in their 50s, Beth and Amy, and a quiet accountant named Marcus, who had removed his wet socks and placed them neatly beside the porch door. All 6 had come for a college reunion weekend. Dean had promised a lighthouse cruise, sunset dinner, and return to the harbor before the weather changed. They had received half a lighthouse, no sunset, and chicken stew at Gull Cottage. Nora found dry clothes left by former ferry passengers. The sweatshirts did not fit anyone correctly, which made them equal. Marcus wore one advertising a plumbing supply company. Laurel said, "Belle Island Crew," in faded green letters. "That feels optimistic," she said. "You caught a dock line," Nora answered. "You qualify." Dean tried to help distribute bowls. He kept asking who needed what in the voice he used on tours. "We've got plenty of hot food. There are extra towels upstairs. We're safe and comfortable, folks." The cottage shuddered. A spoon slid off the table. Beth looked at him. "Could you stop narrating?" Dean put down the bowls. Nora turned on the kitchen radio and contacted the ferry terminal. Static filled the first 2 attempts. On the third, Marisol answered, "Belle Island, we hear you. Junebird is secure at my landing. 6 passengers, Dean and Cal. Everybody's inside. Any injuries?" Cal scraped his hand. "1 passenger's cold and seasick. No serious injuries." Roger raised a finger from beneath his blankets. Deeply offended stomach. Nora pressed the handset. "He says his stomach is offended." "Copy," Marisol said. "We'll notify next of kin." Roger smiled for the first time. Jonah came onto the radio. "What happened to the engines?" Cal took the handset. "Port lost oil pressure. Shut it down. Starboard temperature climbed when we pushed against the wind." "Any oil in the bilge?" "Some. Couldn't tell source in that water. Belts. Starboard belts glazed. Port's still in place. Don't start either one." Dean leaned toward the radio. "We know." Jonah's answer came after a moment. "I was speaking to Cal." Nora looked away so Dean would not see her expression. Jonah asked for the engine model and several symptoms. Cal gave numbers from memory. Dean corrected one, and Cal corrected him back. "We have hoses and belts at maintenance," Jonah said. "I'll bring what might fit on the first safe run. No promise it solves the port side." "When's the first run?" Nora asked. Marisol answered. "When I can see the channel and keep the ferry in it." The radio went quiet. Nora put another log in the stove. The generator remained on, but the lights dimmed whenever the wind hit the cottage broadside. She kept the oil lamps ready. "You have enough beds?" Laurel asked. "Depends how attached everyone is to beds." The upstairs guest room held 2. Wade's room held 1, though Nora had not let a guest sleep there. The parlor sofa was already shaped like a regret. The porch benches could hold people if they did not intend to turn over. Nora gave Wade's bed to Roger and Denise. The 2 sisters took the guest room. Laurel and her husband volunteered for the parlor floor. Marcus said he had slept beneath his office desk during tax season and accepted the sofa. That left the porch for Dean and Cal. "Seems fair," Amy said before going upstairs. Dean waited until the passengers had settled before he spoke. "They'll need to sign something." Nora looked at him across the kitchen. "What?" "An incident acknowledgement. For insurance. Tonight?" "I'm thinking ahead." "You should have tried it at noon." Cal stood at the sink washing blood from his knuckles. He turned off the water. "Don't," he said. Dean rubbed the wet towel between his hands. "I'm trying to protect the business. You took 6 people past the outer bell with 1 engine overdue and the weather coming. The engine wasn't failing when we left. It's been warning you for a month. You said the port side could make the season. I said it could if you stopped running 2 trips a day." Dean glanced toward the hall where the guests slept. "Keep your voice down." Cal laughed once with no humor. Now you care whether they hear? Nora put the lid on the stew pot. Both of you stop. Not because he's right, because Roger needs sleep. Dean moved to the porch. Cal remained beside the sink, staring at the scraped skin across his hand. Nora found antiseptic and gauze in Wade's bathroom cabinet. Half the supplies had expired, but alcohol apparently remained committed to pain. Sit, she told Cal. It's nothing. Good. Then it won't take long. He sat at the kitchen table. Nora cleaned the scrape. Cal flinched. You enjoy that? A little. Family's doing great. She wrapped the gauze around his palm. Why did you go? She asked. You know why? Say it. Cal looked toward the porch door. Dean's outline moved behind the steamed glass. He would have gone without me. That's Dean's decision. Not if I could stop him from killing the other engine. You didn't stop him. I got them here. The answer was not proud. It was simply true. Nora taped the bandage. Thank you for getting them here. Cal flexed his hand. Thank you for leaving the lights on. She began cleaning bowls. Cal picked up a towel and dried without being asked. The power failed at 9:30. This time, the generator still ran. A branch had struck the line between the shed and cottage, pulling the cable loose from the wall. Jonah had shown Nora the shutoff, but repairing it in the dark and rain was not an option. She lit the oil lamps. The porch softened around their small flames. Shadows hid the repaired boards and exposed plaster. For a while, the cottage looked as it might have in Wade's uncle's time, before generators, tourism brochures, and weather alerts delivered by phone. Dean sat on the bench beneath the named hooks. There was no hook for him. Nora noticed him noticing. Grandpa never put our names up, he said. He didn't put mine up either. Crew, ferry people, half the islands. Not us. Cal dried the last bowl. We didn't wait here. We grew up here. We visited, Nora said. Dean looked at her. You too? Yes. The wind pressed rain across the porch windows. One lantern wick smoked. Nora adjusted it until the flame steadied. Dean rubbed his hands over his face. Without his polished clothes and practiced voice, he looked very much like the young man who had once driven Nora home after midnight shifts. He had complained about the smell of fryer oil, then stopped for milkshakes anyway. I thought you'd sell, he said. Nora sat opposite him. I know. No, I mean when I first saw the will, before the funeral was over. I thought you'd last a week, maybe 2. Cal leaned against the doorframe. Dean continued. The island package wasn't new. I'd mocked up brochures while Grandpa was still alive. He knew I wanted the landing tied to the tour business. Did he say you'd get it? Nora asked. He said, you want too many things tied together. I thought he meant the schedule. That sounded like Wade, nearly clear, then refusing to complete the work of being understood. So when he left it to me, Nora said, you decided I was a delay. I decided you wouldn't want it. You never asked. You were broke. You hated being stuck in town caring for him. The cottage needed everything. What was I supposed to think? That I was a person you could speak to? Dean looked down. Cal's voice came quietly from the doorway. I knew he expected you to sell. Nora turned to him. When? At the kitchen table. Not the brochure part, the rest. And you said nothing. Cal's eyes stayed on the floorboards. I'd just gotten the Mercy Ann. The admission sat between them, ugly because it was honest. Cal swallowed. Grandpa never said he was proud of me. He barely said the word good unless he was talking about weather. When Mom read my name beside the boat, it felt like, approval? Nora said. Yeah. So you didn't want to question the distribution. I didn't want him to change his mind, even though he was dead. Dean looked toward Cal. You think I felt different? You acted different. I'm better at acting. The cottage groaned under another gust. Nora folded her hands around the warm metal base of the lantern. I didn't get rewarded, she said. Neither brother interrupted. I washed him, fed him, helped him breathe. He left me a roof that leaked into his bed and a dock everybody else already thought they could use. That isn't a prize. It isn't proof he loved me more. I never said it was, Cal said. You let Dean call it fair. Cal closed his eyes. Nora looked at Dean. And you called the cottage my speed because you thought I couldn't handle the boats. I handled Grandpa dying while you both stayed busy. Dean's mouth tightened. I couldn't stand being in that room. You think I could? The question came out louder than she intended. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. All 3 went quiet. Nora lowered her voice. I was scared every night. Sometimes I hated him for ringing that bell. Then he stopped ringing it. and I would have given anything to hear it once more. That's what he left me. Not a clean little story where I was the good one and you were the bad ones. Dean's eyes shone in the lantern light. He looked away. I didn't visit enough, he said. No. I called. You called me. I asked how he was. You asked if he was awake. Dean took the answer without defending himself. Cal sat on the opposite bench. The three of them listened to the storm move around the cottage. After a while, Dean said, I don't know who I am without the June bird. Nora looked at him. That sounds dramatic, he added. It does. It's still true. Then learn who you are with it before it decides for you. A sharp crack came from outside. All three stood. The June bird's bowline had pulled one dock cleat sideways. Cal and Dean ran into the rain. Nora followed with the electric lantern, though it no longer had power. She used a battery flashlight instead. Together, they doubled the line around the piling Jonah had reinforced. Dean worked without directing. Cal took orders without resenting them. Nora held the light and watched the outer corner flex but remain. When they returned inside, soaked again, no one had energy left for truth. Dean and Cal slept on opposite porch benches. Nora lay awake on a blanket beside Mackerel in the kitchen. Around 3, the wind began to ease. At 6, she raised the blue flag. Fog remained over the channel, but the rain had thinned to a mist. The June bird sat low beside the dock, white paint streaked with salt and leaves. It no longer looked like the desirable part of an inheritance. It looked tired. The ferry horn sounded at 7:14. Everyone woke at once. Nora went to the porch. Through the gray morning, the state ferry appeared and turned toward Belle Island. Marisol stood behind the wheelhouse glass. Jonah waited on the forward deck beside a toolbox, 2 belts, a coil of hose, and a box of engine parts. The ramp lowered toward the repaired center boards. The ferry had come because the weather allowed it, because Nora had raised the flag, and because the route still included her home. Not because anyone had begged her brothers for a boat. Marisol stepped off first. She took in the damaged cleat, the June bird tied against 4 strained lines, and the adults emerging from Gull Cottage in borrowed sweatshirts. Busy night? She asked. Nora looked at her. Marisol nodded. Stupid question. Jonah came down the ramp behind her. His eyes found Nora before they found the boat. He crossed the dock and put both hands lightly around her arms, checking her the way he checked machinery. You all right? I'm fine. That word still sounds strange. I'm tired, wet, and angry. Better. He released her, but one hand remained at her elbow for a moment. The ferry crew moved the 6 passengers aboard. Laurel hugged Nora hard enough to push the air from her lungs. I'm leaving you an excellent review, she said. For what? The island. I don't have a review page. I'll find somewhere. Please don't. Roger came down the dock, wearing Wade's old rain pants beneath a plumbing company sweatshirt. Color had returned to his face. I owe you for the pants, he said. You can mail them back. I don't think either of us wants that. Denise held out folded bills. Nora shook her head. Dean owes me. From behind them, Dean said, I do. It was the first uncomplicated thing he had said all morning. Marcus left $20 in the porch jar despite Nora's objection. Amy and Beth washed their breakfast bowls before boarding. Laurel's husband never once raised his camera. At the ramp, Laurel turned to Dean. You're very good at describing the water, she said. You should work on listening to it. Dean accepted that, without the smile he would normally have used to protect himself. Marisol counted everyone twice. The ramp lifted and the ferry pulled away with all 6 passengers warm, dry, and headed toward the harbor. Dean stood at the end of the dock watching them go. They're going to ask for refunds, he said. Nora waited. They should, he added. Jonah opened the June bird's engine compartment. Cal joined him, still wearing Nora's gauze around his hand. The portside bilge held oil and rainwater. A cooler hose had split near a fitting, spraying enough oil to drop the pressure, but not enough to destroy the engine before Cal shut it down. The starboard belt had stretched and glazed from being pushed too hard. Jonah held it up. This was your way home, he said. Dean stared at the belt. Can you replace it? I can replace the belt. The hose needs a temporary bypass if you're moving the boat today, and I want to check whether the port engine ran dry. I shut it down as soon as the alarm came on. Cal looked at him. I shut it down. Dean did not argue. They worked until nearly noon. Nora made coffee and warmed the remaining stew. Nobody praised it, which meant the brothers were beginning to recover. When Jonah climbed from the engine compartment, grease streaked one cheek. Nora handed him a towel. "Your coffee damaged me more than the engine," he said. "You've had 6 cups. I keep expecting improvement." Cal came into the porch and found Dean sitting beneath the crew hook. "Port engine turns," Cal said. "No knock. You got lucky." Dean stared into his bowl. "I know. No passengers until both engines are inspected." "I know. Not by you." Dean's spoon struck the bowl. "I said I know." Cal sat across from him. The anger between them had not disappeared. It had simply become too tired to stand. Jonah planned to ride the Junebird back with Cal once the tide and wind settled. Dean would follow on the ferry. The arrangement offended him for about 5 seconds. Then he nodded. Nora found a notepad in the kitchen. "What's that?" Dean asked. "Your bill." He looked almost insulted. 6 meals, Nora said. Coffee, overnight shelter, 1 damaged dock cleat. Cleaning, use of the landing. Family rate? No. Cal covered a laugh with a cough. Nora wrote each item while Dean watched. The amount was less than the envelope he had tried to force on her after the tour, and more than he would have paid if he had canceled the charter. She tore off the page. Dean folded it once and put it in his wallet. "I'll pay, I know." That afternoon, before he boarded the ferry, he stopped beside her sign. "Private home. Ferry passengers. Welcome during delays, tours by invitation only." "I was wrong," he said. Nora did not rescue him with an easy acceptance. "About which part?" "Thinking you'd sell. Bringing the group yesterday. Calling the cottage my speed?" His mouth twisted. "That too? Thinking my work wasn't actual?" Dean looked toward the porch. The storm had left damp coats, muddy floors, and 8 adults' worth of dishes. Nora had spent the night feeding people while he worried about forms. "That too," he said. It was not enough to erase anything. It was enough to be true. Nora folded her arms. "I don't want another island proposal. You won't get one. And if you need the dock, I ask. In an emergency, come in first and ask after." "I can do that. You didn't do it before." "I know." Marisol sounded the boarding horn. Dean stepped onto the ramp, then turned. "I did know the ferry stopped," he said. "I thought it wouldn't matter without Grandpa." Nora looked at the repaired center boards, the freight shelves visible through the clean porch windows, and the flag moving above them. "It mattered," she said. Dean nodded and boarded. The Junebird remained out of service for 5 weeks. Dean refunded the storm charter, paid Nora's bill, and removed every island lunch reference from his website and brochures. The engine work cost enough that he canceled the final wine cruises of the season. He complained about all of it, but his complaints stopped, including Nora. Cal charged him for repair time. The brothers argued over the invoice in the Mercy Ann's gear shed, then agreed on an amount neither liked. It was the first piece of business they conducted without Wade's memory settling the question for them. The Mercy Ann returned to the water with a rebuilt transmission. Cal's first reverse maneuver at Belle Island was so smooth that he performed it twice. "You're showing off," Nora called from the dock. "I'm testing. You tested it in town. Different water." He paid for seasonal landing access with money instead of lumber. Nora charged him less than a public berth, and enough that neither could call it a favor. He still repaired the rain barrels when the fittings leaked and replaced dock boards without being asked. Before every arrival, he radioed. Dean did too. His first request came in late November, when a sudden squall caught the Junebird west of the island. There were no passengers aboard, only Dean and a mechanic returning from engine trials. "Belle Island, permission to shelter?" he asked. Nora answered from Wade's kitchen radio. "Inner side. Watch the new cleat. Copy." He tied up, came inside, and hung his wet jacket on the unmarked hook beside crew. Nora gave him coffee. He drank it without complaint, which worried her more than the weather. The cottage did not become sensible over winter. The south roof leaked during the first snow. The generator froze twice. Ferry cancellations cost Nora 6 harbor house shifts between December and February. She slept in thermal underwear and learned that Mackerel considered himself entitled to most of the blankets. The upstairs room stayed empty for weeks at a time. The porch jar covered coffee and little else. Freight handling brought barter more often than money: eggs from Long Shoal, smoked fish from Len, a bag of onions from someone who did not sign the guest book. Nora paid the final tax installment 3 days before the deadline. The insurance company renewed the cottage after the roof and dock work, with a list of conditions for the coming year. Nora pinned that list beside her pantry calendar. It was not good news or bad news. It was work. Jonah came most Saturdays that the ferry ran. Sometimes he brought tools, sometimes he brought only his hostile coffee and sat on the porch while Nora closed out room bookings. They went to dinner in town twice, although the first time Tessa seated them beside the kitchen door and passed through every 6 minutes. "She's checking on you," Jonah said. "She's checking on you. Should I be concerned?" Yes. Their first kiss happened at the Belle Island landing in March, while freezing rain struck the ferry windows and Marisol leaned on the horn. It was brief, cold, and badly timed. "Romantic," Nora said. "I had a better plan. The ferry doesn't care." Marisol sounded the horn again. Jonah stepped backward onto the ramp. "Saturday? Bring flashing. I'm moved by your tenderness." The ferry carried him away before she could answer. When spring returned, Mina and Joe came back for the warblers. Faye sent 2 other adult researchers. Tessa increased the ferry soup order after the concession sold out 3 Fridays in a row. Nora converted the storage shelves into numbered freight spaces and hung a small rate card beside the coffee jar. She never called Cottage an inn. It remained a house with 1 rentable room, unreliable hot water, and a dog who judged luggage. It also paid for itself most months. Dean's brochures changed. The new cover showed the June bird in open water, no island behind it. His lighthouse tours ran fewer times at higher prices, and he began leaving 2 maintenance days open each month. The business did not become an empire. It became one boat he could afford to operate without pretending repairs were betrayal. He asked Nora before using a photograph of Wade. She said no to the first one and yes to the second. Elaine avoided Belle Island until June. She talked about visiting. She asked about the guest room, the ferry weather, and whether Dean might bring her in the June bird. Each conversation ended without a date. Then, one Tuesday morning, the ferry ramp lowered and Elaine walked off alone. She wore a blue raincoat, carried a bakery box in both hands, and looked pale enough that Marisol followed with a paper bag. "She did fine," Marisol said. "I did not," Elaine answered. "You remained upright. Your standards are alarming." Nora took the bakery box. "You came on the ferry, I noticed." Elaine glanced at the dock, then toward the cottage. Her eyes moved over the repaired boards, the blue flag, and the porch sign. "I thought it would be bigger," she said. "The ferry? The thing I was afraid of." Marisol laughed on her way back up the ramp. Nora and Elaine walked to the cottage slowly. Mackerel met them in the yard, tail moving with elderly dignity. Elaine knelt to hug him, and he accepted as if forgiving her absence personally. Inside the porch, she stopped beneath the hooks. Faye, Len, Marisol, crew. Nora had added 1 more over the winter. Nora was painted beneath Wade on a narrow board beside the door. The letters smaller, but equally dark. Framed photographs stood on the shelf above the mugs. Faye had brought one of Wade beside 3 ferry deckhands after a winter breakdown. Marisol contributed another, showing him holding a burned pot, while an entire crew laughed. Elaine touched the edge of that frame. "I never saw these. Neither did I. He looks happy. He liked people needing him for 1 night at a time." Elaine winced. Nora had not intended the sentence as punishment, but neither pretended it was harmless. They carried the bakery box into the kitchen. Elaine had brought lemon cake, Wade's favorite, though he used to scrape off the icing and leave it on his plate. She sat in his chair. For several minutes, they talked about the roof, Tessa's soup contract, and whether Mackerel needed a softer bed. Then Elaine placed both hands flat on the table. "I let you do too much," she said. Nora looked toward the pantry calendar. "Yes, I kept telling myself your grandfather wanted you, that you knew how to manage him. I did. That wasn't the same as wanting to." "No?" Elaine's fingers curled against the tabletop. "I was afraid of him. Even sick, he could make me feel 16. You stood up to him. So I told myself you were stronger. I was tired. I know. You knew then." Elaine's eyes filled. "Yes," she said. "I knew then." There was no explanation that could turn that into a kindness. Nora cut 2 pieces of cake and put them on plates. "I'm not ready to tell you it's all right," she said. Elaine nodded. "I didn't come for that." "Why did you come?" Elaine looked toward the channel, visible through the kitchen window. "Because you kept asking me to see your life, and I kept asking one of your brothers to bring me to it." Nora set down the knife. "I thought I should come the way you do." They ate the cake. Elaine scraped off the icing exactly as Wade had. When the afternoon ferry sounded from the channel, Elaine carried her plate to the sink. "I can stay for the next one," she said. "You'll miss dinner. I've missed things before." Nora raised the blue flag anyway, giving her the choice. The ferry turned toward Belle Island. Elaine decided to stay. Nora stood on the repaired dock as the ramp lowered for 2 freight boxes and a passenger collecting coffee. When it lifted again, Marisol waved from the wheelhouse. Mackerel waited on the porch. Elaine waited in the kitchen. Jonah's tools were stacked beside the south wall for Saturday. The ferry pulled back into the channel, leaving a long white wake across the water. Nora watched it go without wanting to be aboard. She was not stranded, she was home.